The tape. The tape. Let's grind. The tape. We do a little bit different around here.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
The tape. Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face.
Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
The tape. Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play. We ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face. Shut up and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The tape. The tape. Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The tape. The tape.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro.
The tape.
UGA game day, boy, we ball out. Pull up, put the whole conference in the doghouse. Leave them 6 feet, see me on the win streak. All-star status, go coach, and the bench deep. Right. Offense on 10, how we run it? Your best ain't nothing, we gon' send them boys punting. Yep. Black and red, got them dead on arrival. Defense hunkered down for the tie. Hey, you don't want it with the dogs. Film guy on it, you don't want it with my dog. Break it down, play by play, that's the day-to-day. They know we ain't come to play, boy, it's UGA. Kirby Smart, I cannot play the fool. Back to back, we did not come to lose. Back to back like we got something to prove. Pay your dues, dog nation on the move. What's up?
We do a little bit different around here.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
The tape. The tape.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face.
Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Shut up and grind the tape.
Shut up. Let's grind.
We ain't gonna play, we ain't gonna play. Them dogs in your face. Shut up and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape.
The tape. The
Shut
tape.
up and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape,
The
bro.
tape.
Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The tape.
Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro.
Shut up. The tape. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to MBR, or as we like to call it around here, Nothing But Rants, the show where I find topics that I'm oddly passionate about and I pontificate upon them. These are not hot takes, but rather takes that I'm hot about. What's up? You really like that? Let's shut up and grind some tape.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to a very special edition of tonight's show. After 3 days, it seems like the common theme this week has been Brooks isn't here. He's not going to be here tonight also, so we decided to take the liberty in renaming tonight's show. It will be, in fact, the JWill and Kirby show. Welcome in. We have a wonderful show planned out for you. Our noon game's about to be illegal. We'll find that out. We'll do our college football questionnaire. JWill has a lottery idea similar to the NBA draft lottery, and we'll go over Big Ten win totals if we have time left. JWill, how are you doing today, bro?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. By the way, this lottery system will not be rigged like the NBA, okay? People like Nico Harrison don't get to have a cop-out for their horrible decisions as a GM. This is the real deal. And you know what? It may not even be feasible. It obviously probably will never happen. But you know what? I figured I'd try a shot at it and maybe make things a little bit more interesting, if you will.
I like it, man. But before we get to all of that, obviously, like, subscribe, rate, review, hit the thumbs up, do all the things you can to help us out. But I want to get to the biggest news of the week so far, at least in the recruiting world. 5-star linebacker Xavier Griffin decommitted from USC yesterday. He was a member of USC's class since July of 2024, which is coming up on a full year now. It would be about 18 months had pen hit paper of him being in the class, should he have remained with USC. But it made me realize something about Lincoln Riley, and I want to give this take. And before I 360 windmill dunk on him, I want to recognize something. Xavier Griffin was a prospect from the University of Georgia. Keeping him in your class from July of 24 to all the way to December of 25 would have been a tall task. I don't need to name out all the sharks that go around in the SEC in that 5-hour radius that would be trying to poach Xavier Griffin like it seems that we've got now. And in an isolated instance of this happening, it's totally understandable. you're at California State, landing the 5-star that's in Georgia isn't likely to happen. But Justice Terry, Isaiah Gibson, Julian Lewis, Kristen Miller, along with others, this has become a repetitive thing with Lincoln Riley. We've seen this before, and it has all the, Lincoln Riley's momentum from the recruiting class. He doesn't finish, and I'm not just talking about the recruiting trail. How many times have we seen Oklahoma teams led by a Heisman-winning quarterback or a Heisman contender look absolutely fantastic all the way through the regular season, win the Big 12 championship, only to get a mud hole stomped in their chest in the college football playoff? In his first year with USC, they won 11-1 regular season, looked really, really good. Had a Heisman-winning quarterback in Caleb Williams, just to get bullied by Utah in the Pac-12 championship and then lose to Tulane in a bowl game. How about 2023? Started 6-0. Caleb Williams looks really, really good. They're going to carry that team. They finished the year 7-5. Last year even, went up against a LSU team that many labeled as a playoff contender heading into that season. It was, hey, Lincoln Riley might have turned a corner in this Big Ten era. Defense looks good. Yeah, they went 6-6 regular season. So Lincoln Riley's issue has never been starting strong. It's never been building momentum on the recruiting trail or starting out hot or having these periods of, wow, Lincoln Riley looks like the best coach. In fact, starting out strong is exactly what he's been known for. He's known for these red-hot moments and things he can get. The problem is he never crosses the finish line in one piece. So, yeah, USC still has the number 1 recruiting class right now in 2026. I think they have 27 commits when we check 247. And they can still land Xavier Griffin. Recruitment's back open. Just because you decommit just doesn't mean you're not there. We saw Jared Curtis do this year with Georgia. But after 9 years of not being able to cross the finish line, I'm selling all and any Lincoln Riley hype until further notice. I don't want to hear another thing about they're heating up on the recruiting trail. USC looks really good. Or, wow, USC's 4-0 this year. Things are starting out really well. I'm selling it all. Miss me with that until Lincoln Riley is able to cross the finish line in one piece and actually finish the job or turn in a full season's worth of good work or a full recruiting class worth of hanging on to prospects. I'm done. I had to get that off, JWill. Sorry, I didn't mean to hog the camera a little bit, but
you don't have to apologize for that.
Thanks, man.
You're more than welcome to give off a take. And I feel like you've been kind of building this take up a little bit when we started hinting at Xavier Griffin probably not believed to stay in USC's class. At least that's what some coaches around the league expressed. This guy is not going to end up at USC, likely to end up somewhere in the SEC. And then you mentioned that USC could still likely land him. Well, after his decommitment, it's announced that Texas is now getting a visit, Alabama's getting a visit, Ohio State's getting a visit, and Florida's getting a visit. So just as anyone would imagine for a 5-star and a top 25 player in the country, there's some heavy hitters in the mix for this one. And then Georgia is also still in the mix. Obviously, is an in-state product, literally 45 minutes from the University of Georgia. So they're at play as well. But I think the thing is that, and what we've talked about with Lincoln Riley specifically in this class is, and especially after you mentioned his history with landing these recruits, is just kind of know your lane and know your territory. And I know this is probably hard for him to learn because being at Oklahoma, you were able to get after some of these Georgia guys because you have some proximity to them. And maybe that would have been easier too, especially now that they're in the SEC. But when you go all the way across the country and you're pitching to players in the state of Georgia or the state of Florida or whoever, that, hey, come to the West Coast and play in the Big Ten for the USC Trojans. That's hard. That's hard to do. It's hard to sell that, especially when for those kids that have grown up in those states, all they hear about is the SEC, how great it is. They learned about Nick Saban growing up. They learned about Kirby Smart growing up, how great SEC football is, the stardom of Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and schools like that in that conference, and to then try and sell a school on the other side of the country, which is basically a different world than what you grow up in these states. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, and what Brooks mentioned today in our sub-episode is, he's on the trail like he is today constantly seeing recruits in the state, constantly seeing college coaches who are looking at these prospects, and he mentioned that he never sees Oregon in the state of Georgia. He doesn't see Dan Lanning coming to the state of Georgia to look at these kids at high schools or anything like that, but he does go to Florida, and he does go to some schools there, so that's not to say that Lanning does not recruit these kids or that he doesn't get in the mix for these kids, but of all the faces that he sees regularly, Oregon is not one of them, and there's a reason for that. And I think that Lincoln Riley has somewhat learned that this year because he has a bunch of Cali kids in this class. It's a majority of California kids, and I think that's a good thing. That's kind of the direction that he needs to go to because California pumps out great recruits as well. So if he can hold on to the core of this class, the majority of them, I think he'll be okay. But it is kind of setting up yet again to be one of those classes for Lincoln.
And again, I like I said, number one class is still on the table for USC. They've got a lot of California kids. I think the only one that's like top of their list is the 5-star kid from Florida, the offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the ones where it's like, you have to keep attention to on that. But I understand why you try to go into Georgia, why you try to go into these places. I mean, you look at the stats every year. How many NFL draft picks in the first round were from the state, not the team, the state of Georgia as a whole. I get why you want to go into these things, but you are at a geographical disadvantage. It's part of the reason why I feel like USC is not as enticing of a job as it once was, because the state of California has been so picked over. Now you have to compete with other schools that are coming into your state, on top of the fact that you can't really go elsewhere. You can't go to Georgia and win these recruitment battles. We've seen it time and time again. And maybe there's a coach out there that can, but Lincoln Riley does not appear to be the one to do so. I mean, how many times, like I said, 4 or 5 guys that were in the state of Georgia, 4- and 5-star commits, landed on USC's roster, and the end of the day, come signing day, they're not on there. So it's a bad look for Lincoln Riley at this point. So I get it.
Yeah, it is, but it still going to hold true to what his class looks like right now. I mean, 27 commitments to this point is quite ridiculous. I mean, most teams are hovering around the number of 10, maybe 8 guys. Like, I think South Carolina has 6 in their class right now. But we all know the deal, especially with how things are setting up now, is June and July are the biggest months.
Yep.
That's when you really sell your recruiting class. That's when you really get a shape and a mold for this is how they're setting up to finish, and then the remainder of kids that haven't committed going into August. Then you kind of get a better idea of, like, okay, who's left on the table, who's at play, and who could finish where. Well, Lincoln Riley got a head start on this, but perhaps they sold him on a visit high, got him committed, and then take a trip to Georgia, take a trip to Alabama, go and see what the Texas Longhorns are doing with Steve Sarkisian. It's like, looks a little different than it does out in California.
Now, as far as Xavier Griffin's recruitment goes, it seems like there's a lot of lists on the table right now. And once you decommit as a 5-star, everyone comes back to the table for you. There are reports that he would be in Georgia this weekend for a visit. Yeah. I don't know if he's got others scheduled or not. Did you?
That's just what sources have indicated to us, that he does plan to be there this weekend for the scavenger hunt. So that's what we have. But I think that the 2 schools that have the biggest advantage of this, because I mentioned that Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, and Florida in the mix. I think Alabama and Texas are the 2 teams that really have an advantage here, because what have we known about Georgia and Ohio State for the last few months? Well, they've been all in on the Tyler Atkinson action and the recruitment process there. That's been their number one guy at the linebacker position. That is who they're going after. That is their number one linebacker, or it appears to be their number one linebacker on the board. But I say that to also mention of, obviously, we know that other schools like Georgia and like Ohio State and like Texas and Alabama, they've been recruiting Griffin the whole time, despite the fact that he's been committed to USC. So that's not to say that, now that Griffin is up for grabs officially, that Georgia's getting back into the mix. This is a kid that they have been recruiting, that they have wanted the entire time. But I would certainly look at Alabama and Texas as the teams that maybe have some more open space monetarily to shut this one down, but you never know with Georgia and Ohio State at play either.
No, you never do. And this is such a weird era of college football recruiting, to where money can talk, but it can also be you don't really know what the player's motivations are. It used to be, what does a player want other than monetary value? That's not even discussed. Now that plays a huge factor. We just allegedly saw that, according to a false narrative pushed by Pete Nakos. We saw that take place in the number 1 recruits of Jackson Cantwell, where money may or may not be the reason that he went to Miami, despite what he claims. So very interesting. Another interesting thing is, now, I don't want this to become a political show, but if you are a certain district representative in the state of Ohio hoping to get goodwill with your citizens, I guess, just start chucking up BS bills ideas that could will undoubtedly not pass through, but at least is a good PR move.
Just showing that you care about college football goes a long way.
Yes, if you're not, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I mean, there's, again, not to get too political, but I don't think it was a coincidence that Donald Trump showed up at one of the biggest college football games going into the election last year. But anyways, cut it off right there. That's the end of that talk. But today's news of let's ban noon games for Ohio State and Ohio State only, because what was his name? Tex
Fisher.
Tex Fisher wants to ban noon games for Ohio State.
District 59 representative for the state of Ohio suggested that there should be a fine to Fox if a noon kickoff takes place for an Ohio State game. If you remember last year, I don't know if this is the same one who did it, But there was an entire bill passed for flag planting on another team's home field should be made illegal after the Michigan and Ohio State fiasco that occurred last year after Michigan upset Ohio State. So it's this new trend, I guess, of politicians. They did it for Georgia last year or 2 years ago when they were left out of the playoff against Florida State of, hey, we're going to make a push to sue the college football playoff committee. It's clearly just a PR move. No one
100%.
ever thinks that these are going to pass. With that said, noon kickoffs are getting way too much hate.
They're overhated so much.
I don't understand this. I understand as a fan, as someone who you build up this moment of two really big powerhouse games that it's the first thing you see at noon. I understand from the tailgate standpoint, from the weather standpoint of I would much rather watch a football game take place at the cool evening of 7:30 than start at noon, the sun's being down on you. I understand that for fans going in. The reality is only about 10% of fans are attending the games. The other 90% that are complaining about this, I don't understand. I've always enjoyed the fact that I get to wake up and within the first 30 minutes of college football taking place, there's an important game going on. I would much rather wake up, say, okay, this game at noon is important. This game at 3:30 will also be a top 15 matchup. And then this game at 7:30 is the top 5 matchup. I've never understood wanting to, everything has to be a 7:30 kick, backlogging it. Meaningless football for 4 hours of the day, that never makes sense to me.
I mean, let's just build out our perfect college football day, hypothetically. Like, these are not actual dates for these games. This would not actually line up. I'm just going to spitfire an ideal college football day. You get Ohio State and Oregon at noon. I mean, just a heavy hitter right off the bat.
Beautiful.
And then you get, let's say, Georgia and Florida. They're going to play at 3:30. So then right after Ohio State and Oregon play, you're immediately getting Georgia and Florida, one of the two big rivalries within the conference. And then at 7:30, you're going to get, let's say, Clemson and Miami. So you get 3 big conferences, 3 big games within these conferences, but this is at risk because Ohio State feels like they're too good for noon games. Georgia's been dealing with noon games. I mean, they had like 5 of them within one season after a national title. Well, what does it matter? How do you change that? Well, you're good at football, and you make noon games matter because you are one of the best teams in the country, and people tune in regardless. And again, noon football games are fantastic because it opens up the rest of your day. Even if you're at the game, you're going to make it home in time for that late-night primetime game, whoever you want to watch. I mean, I just don't understand. Like, why are we too good for noon games? What's so bad about noon games? Like, and it's not like they're just whoring you out to noon games. They're just like, all right, 12 games, Ohio State, you're the noon slot because we think you're the top team in the country. No, you get maybe 4 of them at most. But that's always been your brand. That's been that conference's brand is, okay, the SEC wants to take the 3:30 slot, and ESPN now has them slotted in at 7:30 because they have the SEC. Well, we're going to take over the noon slot. That's your whole conference's brand, and you want to act like you're too good for your own conference? It's just ridiculous to me.
I mean, I would be more upset as the Pac-12 and doing the Pac-12 after dark. What do you mean our kickoff is at 11 p.m. Eastern time? No one's going to stay up to watch our football game. At least in the big noon kick, everyone is tuning in. It's noon. Oh, this teams are playing. I understand from the aspect of how the big noon kick has kind of swallowed the idea of, the most important game in the Big Ten is at noon is relegated to then. That's upsetting to some degree. I understand that. I've never understood hating it to the point where you complain this much.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be like one of the East Coast NFL teams being like, we don't want to play the 1 p.m. slot. We want to play at 4 every time, or we want to play at 8 every single time. Well, too bad. Like, who cares? Who honestly cares? You're going to watch it regardless. You're going to enjoy it regardless. You're going to watch your team no matter what time they play. So who cares if it's at noon a couple of times a year? Get over yourself.
That said, if you're running for an election at all, just do the most layup take ever where everyone hates. If you're going to be a Georgia senator, do something like it's illegal to wear orange and blue in a building.
I'm just waiting for one of these political people to be like,
people.
That's it. I'm going to do something about these refs. I'm going to make refs great. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that they get every call right. That's what I'm pushing for. I mean, you want to talk about layups. That's the one. Everybody, yes, this is my man or woman right here. We're getting the job done. Now we're talking about things that actually matter. Don't talk about my taxes. Let's talk about refs selling my favorite football team on Saturdays. That's what I care about.
That is the absolute best. All right, college football questionnaire time. We've got 4 teams: Texas A&M, SMU, Georgia Tech, Missouri. Which one of these teams do you want to ask questions for first, JWill?
I get to pick which one I want to go with first. Let's go with the Aggies. I think they're an interesting football team this year.
The Aggies are an interesting football team this year, going in the second year under Mike Elko, and that's kind of what the first question I have is, what does year 2 look like? We've gotten to an age of college football where results are expected even within year 1. So Texas A&M had a rather interesting season last year. You'd have to imagine that from year 1 to year 2, you'll take a step up. There were some highs last year. There were some lows. What does year 2 look like? That's my first question. Piggybacking off of that, what does Marcel Reed look like? Marcel Reed's going to get a full year, as you'd assume, as the starter for Texas A&M. Had some high moments last year, like I said, had some low ones. Things didn't go very well in certain times. I'm interested to see what they look like. Question number 3, and I think this will be a major catalyst for this season. What do you look like against Notre Dame? Last year's Notre Dame loss was kind of excused at first. It was like, Notre Dame's a good team. They're not great. It's the first game of the season. Notre Dame also has Marcus Freeman. We don't really know what they are. It's Mike Elko's first season. That loss was kind of excused. This year, Notre Dame is a bona fide playoff contender. And, oh, by the way, you're going into South Bend. I think that will be a major catalyst for how that season goes for Texas A&M, what they look like against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think that the bigger question for Texas A&M is kind of what the defense is going to look like, because you lost quite a few members on that defense, some really good football players. But on the flip side of that, they got some really solid returnees on the offense. Then they also added in KC Concepcion from NC State, who's a really solid wide receiver, a really good playmaker. And then you get Marcel Reed, who is just a redshirt sophomore who's going to go into like a year and a half of being the starting quarterback for the Aggies. But I think the biggest returning piece for them is Le'Veon Moss. I love Le'Veon Moss as a running back. He's been really good for the Aggies over the past couple of years. I think he's a great SEC back. And then on top of that, they have a really veteran offensive line. I mean, some old guys up there that have some experience with them. So I think the offense is definitely going to level itself out. And I think you're going to see some improvement there under Elko. But again, it's kind of like, you're going into year 2, and your defense was kind of like the heartbeat of your team last year. Even though they had their ups and downs, that team overall had their ups and downs, I think part and due because of the quarterback situation. But Shamar Stewart is no longer there, and some other playmakers that you had last year. So what does that look like? Can you still keep somewhat of that core DNA from last year and really have a difference maker? Because I think they're just a balanced football team. Like, I'm not saying that Texas A&M has to be top 20 in both offense and defense for them to be great. Obviously, that is
complementary.
They got to be complimentary, and that kind of is a measuring stick for great football teams of being top 25 in both of those ranges. That kind of indicates where you're going to be in the college football playoff and if you are going to be successful on the big stage. But I think if they can just be complimentary and be a really solid football team, because I don't think it's fair to say that in year 2 Mike Elko has to make this big strong push for the college football playoff with Texas A&M. But I think that you do have to see some sort of step forward for them this year, and definitely continue on this competitive uphill climb for them.
Absolutely. Question number 4 I have is, can you close out the season better? With the exception of a win over New Mexico State, Texas A&M lost all their games last season. Last 5 of their games. New Mexico State was the only win. Closed out with a really ugly overtime loss to Auburn, lost to a bad USC team in a bowl game. Like, it just got very ugly. Offense looked anemic at home against Texas. Like, you have to close out the season better. There was a point last year where they were a top 10 team in the driver's seat to make the SEC championship.
Yeah, they were the favorite.
Like, you have to close out the season better. People forget how high everyone was on Texas A&M come, mid-November, and it just all went to shit. So I think that you have to close out the season better if you're Texas A&M.
I mean, if you want to win that fan base over, beat Texas. I mean, that rivalry.
Question 4.
And that it's hard to remember, I think, how big of a rivalry that is, because until last year, we were so far removed from them playing annually. And I think it's fantastic that they have reignited this rivalry, because it's one of the biggest ones in the entire sport.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they hate each other. And I think another thing that helped also is the back end of that Texas A&M rivalry. Texas was kind of pushing them around.
Oh, for sure.
So the fact that you had really 15 years of it being kind of a dead rivalry, now it's back. If Texas A&M can win this game, very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's my 5 for Texas A&M. Moving on to SMU. And a common theme that we'll find with all of these questions is that the most important one revolves around, how does the quarterback play? So I'll ask the same thing for SMU. How does Jonas Jennings play this year?
Kevin Jennings.
I don't know why I keep doing that. Who is Jonas Jennings?
Jonas Jennings, I don't know. I don't know where your mind was going there. There's quite a few Jennings from the UGA legacy realm.
Perhaps.
Might have been pulling from there.
Maybe I was thinking of the Jonas Brothers.
Oh, perhaps.
Either way, how does Kevin Jennings play this year?
Boy, it can't be like how he played in the college football playoff, I'll tell you that much.
No.
That was just complete and utter stinky poo-poo play. That's what that was. But I think because the thing about a player like Kevin Jennings is there's moments where it looks fantastic, and it looks like this is just going to go the long haul, that they have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and then the very next week it looks like the complete opposite. And, I think people kind of forget, too, that last year at the start of the season, Preston Stone was supposed to be the guy for SMU at quarterback. He was a starting quarterback for SMU, and then they kind of had some slip-ups and they had to struggle some victory over Nevada early on in the season, and Preston Stone scratched off the starting lineup and insert Kevin Jennings. He's now the starting quarterback. So there was kind of some changing of the hall over there. So I think that maybe now that he's had this full off season of I know I'm the guy, I'm the starting quarterback, knowing that this team is capable of going to the college football playoff and knowing what exactly it takes, I still think SMU is one of the better teams in the ACC because of Kevin Jennings, but also because SMU spends money. They have the money to do it, and they construct a really solid roster, and also they play in a conference that doesn't have too many of those, too many teams that appear to be highly competitive going into this season. But it really does kind of revolve around Kevin Jennings and what he looks like this year. Was their growth? Was their development?
Not too many bagmen in the SEC. Question 2, what does your running back position look like? I think Rashard Smith was a pleasant surprise for them out of Miami last year. He's no longer on the roster. He's off to the NFL draft. What do you have at the running back position there? I mean, it's a very important aspect of having the run game for SMU because you don't want to put Kevin Jennings under that much stress. We've seen the avenue where Kevin Jennings feels like he has to be a superhero. Go check the Penn State film. Go watch the first half of the ACC championship. I mean, turnovers left and right. So if you can get Kevin Jennings in a comfortable area with a running back that can supplement your offense, I think that they'll be in a much better position. Question number 3, was last year a fluke? And I think that's going to be answered this year because we saw last year, and there was a kind of a moment where it was like, yeah, okay, they lost to BYU, but they're kind of they're just beating teams. They're not handling them. There's nothing really sexy about SMU. We all saw them creeping up in the top 10. Everyone was like, nah, that's not going to happen. That's not a thing. To the point where we were begging, like, please do not make this a playoff team. I mean, there was an entire subgenre of fans in college football that said Alabama or South Carolina should be in over this team, even though they were more qualified. So that's the question there. Was it a fluke?
It could be classified as a fluke, but I want to say no because SMU outright earned their spot in the ACC. And while Clemson obviously earned their spot in the ACC championship game, it was also somewhat given to them because Miami decided to crap the bed against Syracuse and blow what was like a 21-point lead against the Orange. So they earned the right to play in that football game, but again, like, would that game have looked different if Cam Ward, like, they obviously lost the championship game regardless, so it didn't matter in that grand scheme of things, but like FSU had this ultimate fall off, so that automatically kind of opened up an extra spot for them to be in contention for the ACC championship. So I think it really depends on, like, what does the rest of the ACC look like? Like, is Louisville going to be able to take a step forward and actually be a competitive football team and be one of these playoff contenders in this conference with Miller Moss at quarterback? Or are they just going to remain as like this middling ACC team that is better than most but not good enough to get over the best teams in the conference?
Question 4, can you go 2-1 against Miami, Clemson, and Louisville? That's the 3 games I have circled on their schedule where it's like, this is going to be a tough battle for them. If you go 2-1 in that, you'd have to assume 10-2 is a very, very, very manageable schedule. At that point, you're making a really good argument for being a playoff team. So I think that's kind of the quintessential, can you do that? That will be the answer as to whether or not you're a playoff team. And then moving on, if you do make it to the playoff, can you actually compete with these really, really good teams this season? We saw them get manhandled the first half by Clemson and kind of come crawling back. Then we saw them go into Penn State. Now, granted, turnovers, pick sixes. It was a very weird game. Obviously, the moment was too big for them. Cold atmosphere, a lot of things you can point to as to why they lost. But if you go into year 2 and you perhaps play another playoff team, you play another conference championship, and you get pushed around like that, you are going to be relegated as this is SMU. They're not actually a serious contender, and I think SMU has the opportunity to become that, but they have to answer that question first.
Yeah, those are definitely the big games. As it is, it feels like any ACC team is, you're either circling Miami, Louisville, or Clemson on those schedules. If they play all 3, like SMU does, which is unfortunate, then those are the big kickers. But most of them don't. So SMU kind of got the shaft in regards to an ACC schedule. So definitely got to survive that and at least win 2 of those games. But maybe 10-2 is good enough for them.
Moving on to our next team, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Question 1 I have for them, do you beat Colorado week 1? I think that's going to answer a lot of questions about not only Georgia Tech, but Colorado in that first week. Georgia Tech had a really, really good week 1 last year, beating the top 10 Florida State team, who at the time turned out to not be a top 50 team. But I think week 1 could set up some good momentum for Texas or Georgia Tech if they beat Colorado. Question 2. How does Haynes King play this season? There's that quarterback question again. Haynes King was injured for a good majority of the back half of their season, wasn't really effective. They went to Aaron Philo a good bit. Do you see that? Do you see a backup situation again with Haynes King? I know that Haynes King's style of play involves him being tough and physical and getting in there. If he injures himself to the point where he can't be a competent quarterback for you, do you see a different change for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's likely that you get Haynes King at some point in this season is banged up. Maybe not to the extent where he has to completely miss a game, but maybe to a point where he's having to sit out quite a few series or he's not able to finish the rest of the game. He might start that game, but he might have to get pulled. Like, I think it's a reality just because of the style of football that he plays. This isn't Haynes King isn't tough because he's tough as hell. I mean, I think we learned that all of last year. What that dude was put his life on the line for the Yellow Jackets. So he's a really good quarterback, or I should say he's a solid quarterback. I think he's a solid college quarterback. But, I mean, I'm not too sold on like Georgia Tech going into this year and kind of replicating what they did last year because, I mean, I think they caught some breaks in between, but I mean, they lost what was their wide receiver's name that I'm blanking on right now that transferred to Auburn, I believe it was.
I'm blanking on it too.
Yeah.
Justice something?
No, but that said, I'll go back to – I mean, they do return Jamal Haynes, who is a really, really good running back. And they also still have the Malik Rutherford, who gave Georgia some problems in their matchup last year.
Singleton.
Singleton.
Thank you, Hunter
Singleton.
Lacey.
I think that – I mean, he was the focal point of that offense as far as the receiving core goes. So losing him is a big loss, and interested to see if they're able to replace that. Is Malik Rutherford able to step into that role as the primary wide receiver? But the run game in and of itself is going to be fine because you have Haynes King and Jamal Haynes. But knowing what the entire and the rest of the roster looks like for them is what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Next question. Do you win all your home games? Home games this year, Gardner-Webb, Clemson, Temple, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Pitt. I'm not counting Georgia because that game's going to be played in the Bends, and let's be fair, you don't really have a home field advantage against Georgia.
No,
so
you don't.
If you win those games, if you're able to beat Pitt, Syracuse, and Clemson at home, you'd have to imagine that the rest of your schedule is pretty manageable. They could even be competing for an ACC title this year, so that's a very important question for them to answer, I think.
Yeah, just as we were talking about how SMU did not catch a break with their conference schedule, Georgia Tech did in some capacity because their first one is against Clemson. And if you lose that one, you're fine. That's just one conference loss. So then you got Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Duke, Syracuse, NC State, Boston College, and Pitt. Maybe Syracuse is able to continue their success under Fran Brown, and then maybe Duke is able to be something with Mensa now that they got him out of the transfer portal. So but Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, not exactly cream of the crop when it comes to the ACC. Those have been some down programs. Now, Virginia Tech has been known to kind of pop out every now and then. Yeah, be the spoiler in that conference and they almost did it last year against Miami. So they have been known to do that. And I don't want to talk about Georgia Tech like they are the Tier 1 team in the conference. So that's not to say that they could just walk through the rest of their schedule and be fine. I think that they could still have some slip-ups amongst those teams that they do play, even if it isn't the Tier 1 Clemson, SMUs, or Miami.
Mm-hmm. We kind of brushed over this one as well, but do you compete for the ACC this year? I think winning your home games and all the other things we talk about is going to be very dependent on that. Fifth question, is this your last season with Buster Faulkner? We assume the answer to that is yes, but that's going to be very telling to come through the year. I mean, it's not going to affect you in 2025 per se. You'd imagine that even if he takes a coaching job, he'll finish out the year. If you're doing anything substantial like playing in the ACC championship or, God forbid, you're a playoff team, Buster Faulkner is going to finish out the season with you. But it's definitely a question that's looming over Tech right now because you have to have some form of a contingency plan.
Yeah, I mean, this guy has climbed the coaching totem pole very quickly. And that's why I kind of laughed at the fact that He's a great coordinator. Buster Faulkner is a fantastic offensive coordinator, but I laughed at the idea that Georgia fans are like, well, just go get Buster Faulkner. Well, yeah, that's great. Go get Buster Faulkner. You might have him for 1 year. If he has success at Georgia as your offensive coordinator, that dude's getting a head coaching job more than likely. He's not going to be at Georgia for very long. Georgia Tech is running into that problem right now. He very well could be a head coach of, I mean, there's no doubt that he could get a G5 offer, but I'm sure that there might be some Power 4 teams sniffing around Buster Faulkner, or there might be a better offensive coordinating job that could open up that he might go to. That wouldn't apply to Georgia, but in this instance, like, this does feel like the last chance or the last year that they will have Faulkner on their coaching staff, because that dude has just skyrocketed since he got into college coaching.
Absolutely. Moving on to our fourth and final team of the questionnaire for this evening, the Missouri Tigers. Question one I have for them, pretty simple. What does the quarterback situation look like?
They don't have one.
It seems like Bo Pribula has kind of emerged as like, hey, this is who we think is going to start, but I think replacing Brady Cook is turning out to be much harder than they anticipated.
Yeah, they don't have one. There just isn't a situation.
Uh-oh.
That's just kind of how I feel about it. I mean, Bo Pribula, we saw it last year. I believe it was against South Carolina, or it was one of the late year games, maybe even the rivalry game against Arkansas where he played, because Brady Cook was banged up, and then Brady Cook got inserted back into the game, and he led them to a victory. But it didn't exactly look too promising, and you lost Luther Burden, one of the best wide receivers in the country.
Question number two.
My biggest question, though, would be like, is Matt Zollers kind of going on to this trend of becoming your starting quarterback? Mm-hmm. Would he be an option where if Bo Pribula isn't working out to where we could exchange him in for Zollers midway through the year? Like, that kind of feels like the year that Missouri might be setting up for is, let's just go ahead and give Zollers some burn and try and show some type of life heading into next year and call this year a wash.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at in the quarterback situation right now for Missouri. It's going to be very interesting to watch that play out throughout the regular season. You kind of hit on the question number two. What are you going to do to replace this receiver talent? You have to imagine that a guy like Luther Burden isn't exactly replaceable on your roster, and they lost a couple of other talented guys.
I'm thinking of.
But the fact is that there's a lot of talent missing in that receiver room, combined with the fact that you just lost your starting quarterback. Missouri has a lot of questions to answer on offense throughout the year.
I was thinking of the other guy that came in for Brady Cook. I can't remember his last name. Pyron, maybe?
Yeah, it was Alabama, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. I forgot. Bo Pribula is a guy that came from Penn State. He is a transfer quarterback. Mm-hmm. So I got completely messed up on those names. That's on me. Shout out to Chat for correcting that one.
Chat's always got us. Number three, how do you fare against a relatively manageable schedule? Last year we talked about, hey, Missouri should be one of these teams that compete for a playoff simply because they have a cakewalk for an SEC schedule. It's not much harder in 2025. Kansas, that's going to be a toss-up 50-50 game just because it's a rivalry. South Carolina, that's a tough game. Alabama, and then other than that, Texas A&M with Oklahoma and Arkansas closing out the year. Like, it's not a gauntlet of an SEC schedule. It's about as easy as SEC schedules come. How are you able to manage it? I don't think anyone's expecting playoff from them or anything like that. But how can you manage a schedule that's not like Florida's or South Carolina's or something like that?
It's funny, though, because we went into last year talking about how that schedule felt easy because it was easy compared to other SEC schedules. But coming into this year, it feels tougher. Even though it's the same opponents, it feels tougher, not because of anything of Missouri's doing, but because Texas A&M is expected to be better. Oklahoma's expected to be better.
Vanderbilt's better than what we thought they were.
Yeah, so like that schedule doesn't feel as easy as it did last year if you just look at the teams that they're playing, not even looking at what Missouri is or what we're projecting Missouri to be. Just the opponents by themselves feel like they're going to be tougher this year.
All right, question 4 and question 5 are a little bit vague and might not get answered this year, but I feel like we'll have a really, really good idea of them. Question 4 is, can you live up to expectations in 2025? I don't even know what their expectations are right now.
Bowl-bound, baby.
Yeah, print the T-shirts. As long as you're printing bowl-bound T-shirts some point in October, you're doing a good job. But no, seriously, I don't know what the Missouri fan base, I don't know what the college football world expects from Missouri. Last year we got hey, they beat Ohio State last year. They look really good. They return a lot of starters. Playoff team, or at least should be competing for the SEC. Did not live up to those expectations. You're not hearing nearly as much of noise around the Missouri program right now. So I think the expectations are going to be set on them after week 1 or 2 when they play Kansas and I think another group of 5 teams. So stuff like that, I'm very interested to see what gets answered.
Yeah, the expectations have certainly shifted from what they were last year, but I think that they're just kind of expected to be this good but not great SEC team. I think that that's just kind of the expectation. That's why I think Eli Drinkowitz is the right guy for the job there. I think that he is a head coach that is going to make you a good football team.
Did you read my?
I thought you already asked that because you said 4 and 5 playing to one another.
I didn't ask that one yet. But is Eli Drinkowitz the right guy for Missouri?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so because I think that he's proven that he can get a 5-star in a recruiting class, which is quite a bit for what Missouri does typically on the recruiting trail, like getting a 5-star or even getting like a guy like Damon Wilson out of the transfer portal. That's a big get for you, especially like battling off a team like Ohio State, who's after Damon Wilson, what many believed was going to be the team that Damon Wilson ultimately chooses. That's a big get. And they've done this before where they've stolen some former, I shouldn't say stolen, but where they've gotten some former highly rated guys out of high school to then go play for their football team. Darius Smith being another one of these, who was a Georgia guy that Missouri ended up nabbing. So I think he does all the right things for what Missouri is, for what we believe Missouri to be as a football program, as what we aspire them to be as a program. Again, they're good, but they're not great. But maybe every now and then, like when you do get a Cody Schrader, maybe you can be a great football team. Or when you do get a Luther Bird, maybe you can be a great football team. Like those are the big things. They've gotten some really solid defensive linemen too over the years at Missouri. So they're no slouch, which is what they used to be. They used to be a complete slouch. They were an afterthought in the SEC, even though they made the conference title game one of their first few years into the conference.
It's crazy to think they won the East in a row, 2 times in a row within the first 3 years of their emergence in the SEC and haven't done shit since.
Yeah, they haven't at all. So I just kind of think that we know what the baseline is for Missouri, and Eli Drinkowitz fits that baseline. I think he has shown that he can accomplish that at the very least.
That concludes this episode and this week's questionnaire for college football teams. Now on to probably the segment I'm most excited to introduce because I don't know exactly what it is. But JWill, you're a big basketball guy, and the topic of discussion around NBA right now has kind of been the corruption of a lottery pick. But the lottery pick itself is a very interesting topic, one that you think you want to tackle for college football. Yeah,
it just kind of came across my mind because obviously after the NBA lottery happened, people were like, oh, the NFL needs a lottery system. That would be absolutely epic. I disagree with that. I don't think the NFL needs a lottery system. I think that's kind of bogus. But I was like, maybe there's a world where we could create one for college football. And this is just, a fun segment to just kind of think about how this would change college football. And maybe it could make some things better, in my opinion. I think it certainly makes some things more interesting. So here is my layout for a college football lottery system. Now, first off, this is not a lottery for players to get selected by teams because I do not want to take away the ability of players to pick where they go. I don't want to ruin the entire recruiting process. I want players to have the ability to pick where they feel like they fit best or their best situation or where they want to go to school because they have the right to do that. Now, on the other hand, I think it should be for the coaches. I think that we should have a head coach lottery system. And that, let me just kind of – now, obviously, like this is just something that I laid out. So there's going to be probably some issues that run into this or whatnot, but I tried my best to where I worked out all the kinks in. So first off –
So you Mike Leached it, basically.
Yeah. I was just kind of like, let's see how this goes. Let's take it down a path and see where the path takes us. So first off, fired head coaches are the ones that are entered into this lottery system. So, hey – Hugh Freeze, not working out at Auburn. Okay, Hugh Freeze is now in the college football head coach lottery.
What about Ole Miss Hugh Freeze? Does he get to go to the lottery?
Okay, so this is where there's some stipulations into this because one of the points that I have is that the college football teams have to hold on to the coach that they hire for at least 4 years because, we're a 3-year show. We say year 3 is the year that you show improvement, but I said 4 because that's an entire class of players. And by an entire class of players, if this guy is the right guy or not. So 4 years, unless a big no-no happens. That big no-no being like Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss or Mel Tucker at Michigan State. Those scenarios, if you obviously have to fire those people. You can't hold on to them any longer because you did a big no-no.
Contract is null and void.
So
can't do those things.
That's the exception in this. But the order of teams that get to pick now, obviously the teams that are entered into this are the teams that do not have a head coach, the teams that are actively searching for a head coach. And the order of teams of the draft, it gets decided by this. It's decided by the overall record, points for, points against, and strength of schedule. I don't know how you combine all of that into one metric, but I'm sure we got some nerds out there that could figure it out of having, baseball does it all the time of slugging percentage, on base percentage. That gives you this. So we can figure out a way to create a metric for this, and that metric would then decide the percentage for your lottery slot. How likely are you to have the first overall pick in the head coaching lottery system in college football? So to prevent tanking, that's what I was getting into about how you have to hold on to them for 4 years. It can't just be, this guy didn't work out in 2 years, but you know what? I heard some rumblings that maybe Kirby Smart looking for a new head coaching job. We're going to tank for him. No, that's not how this works. You got to hold on to that guy. You got to keep on pushing with him because you selected this guy. So non-head coaches, that would be the next question of like, well, what if there's an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator that wants to take on a head coaching position? So non-head coaches who want to enter the lottery pool must declare their decision. Just like players declare for the NFL draft, these coaches must say, I am entering the head coach lottery. So then they would go through head coaching combine. You know how Gruden does those QB classes and he brings them in. Like all football fans know about this. Just like there's an NFL combine for players and you get to evaluate these players, there's a coaching combine for these non-head coaches where you're going to go interview, you're going to go stand up on the board, you're going to talk football, you're going to lay out how you would run a college football program, this, that, and the other. And so then teams get an evaluation on you and they know, okay, this guy's number 1 on our board, this guy's number 2, and you get an idea of how, all right, these are where these guys are slotted. You could even get some head coaching mock drafts going in, man. I mean, I think this would be absolutely electric.
I love this idea, and I love the idea of the spontaneity of the draft itself, of the lottery of, hey, UAB, you had a really, really bad year this year, but you get one of the most desirable coaches in the coaching business right now simply because we gave you a lottery pick. I think it could provide some interesting stability to the sport. A lot of this, coaches are leaving us for so-and-so, or, how come the coaches never have to abide by the transfer portal rules? It'll also give us some interesting moments of teams maybe being way worse than anticipated.
Here's some other key points, though, on this lottery, okay? So what if a coach doesn't get drafted? Or what if a position coach doesn't get drafted? Say your defensive coordinator, he enters the head coach lottery, doesn't get drafted. Well, he now enters undrafted free agency, but the team he was with prior gets first dibs. If they want to sign that guy back to be their defensive coordinator again, they have the first right to do so. If they pass up, he then enters free agency just like any other coach. He can go interview for other jobs, whatever. He can find his path there. But here's the other part. The transfer portal must remain closed until the draft lottery is completed. Until the draft happens, everybody has their head coach, everybody knows where everybody's going. Then we can open up the transfer portal and players can elect to leave.
I like this a lot more because now it gets away of the, we don't know where this coach is going to be. I'm entering the portal beforehand. My coach is in the draft, but he might not be leaving. So,
or this thought of like, we got to go ahead and fire our coach in the middle of the season because we want to get ahead of the timeline and get him settled in so that way we are ready when the transfer portal opens. So no, the transfer portal has to hold off until the draft is completed. And then I think the best part about this is coaches can't just pick up and leave a team, man. Brian Kelly can't just pick up and leave Notre Dame to go to LSU because he wants to. No. He also has to so this is other part of this is even if you don't get fired, you can still enter the lottery, but you're taking a chance on you. Brian Kelly in this instance would say, I'm leaving Notre Dame and entering the lottery, and you're hoping that LSU is a team that picks you and drafts you. Just like players have preferences for where they want to get drafted or destinations that they want to go to. You better kill that interview. You better crush it. And you better hope that team is the one that drafts you. Or else Brian Kelly could end up being the head coach of the Duke Blue Devils or whoever else that you want to mention.
Ooh, I like this.
So there's some risk.
I think what you need to do is you need to go and do some research. Find every college football team in the last 10 years that's gotten spurned by a coach. Whether it be Notre Dame for Brian Kelly, Oklahoma for Lincoln Riley, all these things. And then find the absolutely crazy district members and politicians in those states and have them propose this because that's the only way it's getting passed. Mm-hmm. I love the idea, and I hate to tell you it, JWill, shit's never going to happen. But
oh, God, no.
But if we get the help of our absolutely glorious and always right politicians, we might be able to make things happen.
We might be able to get this bill passed. We might be able to make this happen. But I don't know. I just think it's fun to think about how there's some pressure put on these coaches. And also the fact of, like if a head coaching job at like when Alabama, their head coaching search started up, it was, Dan Lanning is at play here. Or maybe Glenn Schumann or Kalen DeBoer, who just had a great run. Or maybe Steve Sarkisian. He wants to leave Texas to go to Alabama. Like big names, big heavy hitters. Mike Norvell was in the mix for this one as well, or supposedly was in the mix for that one. Probably dodged a bullet there, Crimson Tide fans. You got to give a fair shot to everybody that's in the portal. I mean, you got to kind of hear them out. And so you might be interviewing Dan Lanning one day, and then you might be interviewing the former UNLV head coach, or you might be getting a relapse of, Dan Mullen just got fired from UNLV. He's back in the mix now. Let's go interview that Jamoke. Let's see if he's fit for our program now. Yeah, I think it just kind of makes things interesting. But as you said, this would never happen. This is just one of those things where, like, how would this work for college football? How could we make a lottery system make sense for college football to where it also makes things interesting? It has some logic to it, and it kind of fixes somewhat of the timeline of the chaoticness of college football, or the chaos, I should say, of the college football offseason.
Yeah, the lottery is definitely a gamble. And speaking of gambling, we're on our last segment of the night. Vegas has released win totals for all of the Big Ten teams this year. Win totals, if you don't know, basically they give a line, say per se, Team X is projected to win 9.5 games. You, the gambler, please bet responsibly, would go in and say, I predict they're going to win more than that or less than that. Pretty simple, straightforward here. So, JWill, you got the numbers here. Who has the lowest win prediction?
The lowest one would be probably a team that you guess, which is Purdue. They are predicted to have 3 games. I called it even. I could see Purdue winning 3 games more than likely.
3 games is pretty doable if you're Purdue.
It's a pretty bad football program,
Moving up, we've got Northwestern at 4, Maryland at 4.5, Wisconsin at 5.5. UCLA at 5.5. Luke Fickell 5.5 wins. That might be curtains for you, buddy. If Wisconsin goes 6-6 this year, the Luke Fickell experience can be deemed a absolute failure.
Northwestern at 4. I put over. I feel like they can win more than 4 football games.
They're a
competitive
scrappy
last year.
football
Yeah,
team.
they're always a scrappy football team. I don't know if they're still playing at the soccer stadium, which has a lake at the back of it, to where it's just howling wind the entire. That might have played a factor, but I think the Northwestern is always just like a scrappy football team in that conference. Maryland, I also put over. I feel like they're a better football team than 4 wins, or 4.5, I should say. I think they could get to the 5-win mark, and I think that they could be bowl eligible by the end of the year. In Wisconsin, I think that they could get to 6 wins.
Yeah.
I don't think that's crazy.
Michigan State at 5.5. Minnesota's going to row their boat to 6.5, and Rutgers also at 5.5. Pretty middling programs that you'd have to expect are supposed to hover around that 6-6, might exceed expectations and go 7-5, but nothing too shocking here. USC at 7.5, however, is one that I'm paying attention to. USC at 7.5, that's projected at 8-4 or 7-5. I don't know if that's necessarily going to cut it. For Lincoln Riley, it will simply because of the buyouts too much, and you can't justify a firing after 8-4. But let's remember, now, they have since moved conferences, and that is a big caveat. But this was a guy who was projected to come to USC to have them competing for national titles and have them be elevated back to this brand where, you've got 35 celebrities that never once pay attention to a football game on the sidelines, or you've got kind of this, hey, Hollywood vibe to it. That hasn't happened yet, and the fact that you see 7.5 right now for USC is kind of alarming.
Yeah, 7 probably not going to cut it, but I'm not saying that that's a fireable offense for Lincoln if he turns in 7 wins. Maybe it is. I don't know. But the fact that we are into this is year 4 of Lincoln Riley at USC, the fact that we're still talking about, or at least Vegas is saying, hey, 7 wins, that's kind of the benchmark this year. That's kind of where we think they're at. Or they're going to go 8-4. Like, that would be considered a success because you overshot your projection, the offseason projection of your team. That's kind of a disappointment. But I think the biggest shocker to me on this list was Illinois at 7.5.
Illinois is projected to be one of these really scrappy sleeper teams this year. I get it. I like it. Luke
People have been saying
Altmaier's
they're
a
the
reliable
sleeper of the
quarterback.
conference.
Luke Altmaier's a reliable quarterback. They're one of these, just muck it up teams. You never really worry about losing to them, but you also go, don't love the idea that we're playing them. But 7.5 might be a little rich for my blood.
A little rich.
Yeah.
I said over. I think that this is like a 9-win, maybe a 10-win football team.
Careful now, Jay.
I said maybe 4 times for a reason, because I think that I do like Illinois. I think they are one of the better teams in this conference, and I definitely think they're better than 7 wins.
Washington at 7.5, Michigan at 8.5, which is honestly what we'd expect. 8-4, 9-3 season.
What is everybody selling Michigan on, man?
I mean, just the fact that they're you'd have to imagine they're a tier 1 or tier 2, at least when it comes to talented rosters. Sherrod Moore's shown you enough that his team at least loves him and was willing to play for him. And they've got some spunk to them with what they did with Ohio State last year, the way they pulled out the win against USC. I understand an 8-4 win season, 9-3. I would venture to say it's probably going to be closer to 8-4, so I'd lean the under there. But
yeah, 8-4 feels fine for Michigan, but I just see them being an okay football team, especially with Will Johnson isn't returning, Kenneth Grant is not returning. I mean, they lost some really good pieces on that defense. And I know Bryce Underwood is a 5-star quarterback, and he's one of the best quarterbacks that they've gotten. J.J. McCarthy was a 5-star. They won a national title with him. He's got all the traits. His ceiling is absurd. I understand all of that. But the offense last year, and I know quarterback was a big problem for them, but it was very anemic at times, and it struggled a lot at times, did that offense. So I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that Michigan is going to be able to compete. Like, when I think of Oregon and Ohio State in this conference, I don't picture Michigan being up there with them. And I know that that's not pictured here by saying their benchmark is 8.5 wins, but I think 8-4 is a solid year for Sherrone Moore.
Vegas is not buying your boy. Indiana, after reaching the playoff last year, going 11-1 in the regular season.
Oh, Fernando Mendoza?
Fernando Mendoza is not
That's
expected to do a Curtis Rourke and give them a playoff season. 8.5 wins for Indiana, which honestly feels like a kind of a modest comeback to earth moment for them. You pull out a 9-3 season for Indiana, that's still really, really good.
It's okay that they're doubting Fernando Mendoza. We're used to this.
Oh,
the
boy.
Fernando Mendoza camp is very used to this because I remember a point in time where someone said, Miami Hurricanes, don't you dare sleep on Fernando Mendoza and the Golden Bears over in Cal. And what do you know? All of a sudden you're in a 4-quarter sweater with Fernando Mendoza and the boys. And now you're telling me that he's going to go be coached by Kurt Signetti?
Yeah, meanwhile, Reese Davis is gargling nails in the booth.
Oh, yeah, that was a brutal game.
Brutal game.
Brutal. Oh, my gosh. I didn't even know it was him at first. It was like, who the heck they got calling this game? Oh, blessings to you and prayers to you, Mr. Reese Davis. But, yeah, I think Fernando Mendoza is certainly like replacing Curtis Rourke. I think you got one of the better options of doing so, trying to keep this continuity with the offense and keep the excitement around Indiana. I think you got a really solid option out of Fernando Mendoza. I think he showed that he is more than serviceable out over at Cal.
All right, we are now down to the final top 3 teams in Vegas odds predictions. Number 3, Penn State at 10 wins even. Penn State obviously has to play Ohio State and Oregon this year. It's a tough regular season schedule. It's not as easy as it was last year for them. But with the run that they made in the college football playoff and how they came this close to beating Notre Dame and being in the national title, people are kind of high on them. On top of the fact that they're returning Drew Aller, they're returning both their running backs, Katron Allen, and the other one I'm forgetting his name of. Yeah, they lost a good bit of pieces on defense, but this is a really, really complete team, and a lot of experts are high on them.
Yeah, it's always funny to see like people start doing their rankings, and it's like Penn State, number 1 team in the country. Penn State potentially could be the best team in the Big Ten. And then you get Vegas's odds, and it's like Ohio State and Oregon projected highest win totals. Penn State right behind them. So it's like as if it's any other year in the Big Ten where people are expecting Oregon and Ohio State to be the front runners in this conference, and Penn State doing what they do best, being the 3rd best team in the conference. Now, 3rd best last year was, like you said, good enough to maybe even make the national title game. You came really close to it. You had a chance to drive down the field and win it, and you failed to do so. But you returned some really good pieces. So maybe there is a world where Penn State is the number 1 team in the conference, but Vegas says probably going to be the 3rd best team in the conference.
Yeah, and again, 10-2 with losses to what you would presume are 2 top 5 teams by the end of the regular season.
Going to be good enough again.
You're a playoff team.
Yeah, going to be good enough again.
The question then becomes, can you elevate that 10-win season to 11, 12, and maybe 13 in the national championship, which has always been the question surrounding James Franklin. It's kind of getting the one that is being presented to Dan Lanning, the team who comes in second here, with Oregon at 10.5 wins. Now, this one kind of came surprising to me because it's a very easy schedule.
Oh, very easy.
It's very easy.
I remember when they released it, and I was like, oh, they got gifted it again. They don't even have Ohio State on the schedule, do they?
No, they have Penn State this year.
Okay, Penn State.
Which, again, not an easy win, not an automatic dub, but you're looking at a team that went 12-0 last year with Ohio State.
In Happy Valley?
I believe so.
Ooh, so that's the whiteout game.
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
Unless they make it at noon.
Oh, they should. They should make it the noon game.
Make it the noon
Just
game.
because they can. Make it the noon game.
We'll get some Pennsylvania politicians joining forces with Ohio State, District 59. What was his name? Tex Fisher. Shout out Tex Fisher.
Going to change the world of football. No more noon games. We're going to be like the NFL. No noon games.
But no, I think this is, again, one of these teams where we're in the modern playoff era where you look at Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, should be a playoff team, all 3 of them, even if the win totals go accordingly here. I would hit the over on this. 11 wins seems very feasible for Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
I know they're replacing a quarterback. I know they lost a lot of wide receiver talent. I know that there's a lot of defensive guys that exited last year, but the reality is Oregon's one of the top rosters in the Big Ten. They have a very easy schedule. And Dan Lanning has proven now, especially given the 2024 season, that he can win big games. He did against Ohio State. He did in the Big Ten game championship against Penn State. Beat both those teams. We don't talk about the Rose Bowl, but they still made it to the dance.
Yeah, I think that it's safe to say that Oregon is going to remain in this top spot in the conference, especially if they keep rolling out the red carpet and giving them the schedules that they have. Same thing for Ohio State.
Also 10.5 wins for Ohio State.
Yeah, so tied for first with Oregon, just how probably anybody else would have it, because when you start, or at least when I think of the Big Ten going into this year, I'm not on the hype train for Penn State this year. I had them 7th overall in my rankings, both behind Oregon and Ohio State. So I do view them still as the third best team in this conference, and I just think that's fitting. That's just how I see it playing, because I get so hung up every single time on Drew Aller. I really do. And I don't know why. Well, I know why. It's because that I haven't been proven otherwise to why I should believe that this guy is just all of a sudden everything's going to click for him, and he's going to play like the number 1 quarterback of the country. I get hung up there every single time. I get hung up on the wide receiver weapons every single time. And I know the defense is going to be good. I know they're going to be solid like they usually are under James Franklin, but the offense and the questions that they have there, the continued questions, the same questions that we have had about Penn State, it just isn't enough for me to say that they could go out there and win the Big Ten right now. I just don't believe that they are the best team in the country or the third best team in the country. I think they're the third best team in the Big Ten right now.
Here's what I'm getting hung up on for the Ohio State session. They went 10-2 last regular season. Massive disappointment. Ryan Day's job was on the line. Lost to Michigan at home. Lost a disappointing game to Oregon. Had a 10-2 season, not good. Are we expecting them to be better than they were in the regular season last year after losing Will Howard, after losing both of your running backs, after losing a litany of guys on defense? Yeah, Jeremiah Smith's still there. Emeka Egbuka's gone. Like, they have talent. It's Ohio State. It's always going to be a talented roster. And they don't play Oregon this year, but guess what? You play Texas week 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a home game. Is it?
Yeah, it is. It's in Columbus.
It's a home game in Columbus. You'd have to assume that you're going to lean Ohio State in that regard, but I don't necessarily know if I believe, and I get it. I get what that team did last year in the postseason. They burned a trail through everyone, and they were much better. But I'm not convinced that Ohio State is going to be better than 10-2 this year. Now, at the same time, it's really, really hard for me to wrap my head around 9-3 as Ohio State, no matter who the quarterback is, no matter who the wide receivers are, no matter what the defense is, just because Ohio State will always be one of the more talented teams in the Big Ten. But it's interesting to look at Vegas and say, yeah, they're going to do exactly what they did in the regular season last year, or maybe even better.
I think that when it comes to Ohio State, you really just lean on the history and the lineage of that program. They've always had an answer at quarterback. I mean, even when they got down to their third-string quarterback in the midst of a playoff run, they had answers there. They always pump out good running backs. They always have good wide receivers, and you can easily point to say, well, they have Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, and you're right, they do. It's two of the best players in college football, and the defense is always solid. Like, they have always been a good football team under Ryan Day. They've always been a good football team in general, so that just provides lack of doubt for them to turn in anything less than 10-2.
That is going to do it for the National Hour. We will see you back.
We're going to talk that dog?
We're going to talk that dog. About, 30 seconds. We'll see you back.
Welcome into Talk the Dog, the show where we find a bone to pick and a take to give. These are not hot takes. These is dog takes. Can I talk that dog? What's up? Really like that. You really like that? Let's shut up and grind some tape.
It's 2025. You would have to imagine that you can change your name if you want to.
Oh, yeah, you can change anything. You know, now I'm sitting over here.
Change anything.
Now I'm sitting over here. That intro feels a lot longer when I don't stare at the screen. When I'm not sitting there watching, waiting to click live, it feels a lot longer.
It's always felt short to me because I usually go to the bathroom in between shows, and I come back and I'm like, oh, we're about to be live again. But
well, because somebody wants to skip out on live shows. I'm sorry that you can't do that.
Yeah. Welcome to hour 2 of the JWill and Kirby show. If you're just tuning in, Brooks has once again abandoned us, left us astray. No, I'm just kidding. He's out at a jamboree right now, scouting, doing the good work.
Scrimmage. Yesterday was a jamboree scrimmage.
Oh,
today.
jamboree was yesterday.
Jamboree was yesterday. Today's at a scrimmage. I believe he's at Cambridge today, checking out some more recruits.
Shout out my boy Jack. All right, first thing we'll get into, touched on in the National Hour. I want to take this from the Georgia angle. Xavier Griffin is back on the board here, and it's a big, big recruitment. 5-star linebacker. You know Glenn Schumann. You know Kirby Smart. 5-star linebackers, and those three names just mixed together. So what does Georgia do to get back in this recruitment? We talked about it earlier. It seems like he's going to be on campus for the scavenger hunt this week. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but it's pretty well reported at this point. Georgia's going to do everything they can to land this kid. They're also looking at landing Tyler Atkinson. You have to imagine you're not going to get both of those guys. You're going to get one or the other. Is Georgia too far behind in this recruitment right now, or is it things have just opened back up for them? What do you think, JWill?
Definitely not too far gone in any of this because, like I mentioned in the National Hour, while Georgia has been in heavy pursuit of Tyler Atkinson, and that appears to be their number one guy, one of the top guys in the class for them, feels like a must-have. They have also been steadily recruiting Xavier Griffin despite the fact that he was committed to USC. Again, this is a guy that is 45 minutes from University of Georgia. Grew up in my hometown. That's so I know it's 45 minutes. It's a 1 hour haul at most, so it's close by. So when you have a 5-star player that's close in the state, you're going to be recruiting him, and especially at linebacker, a position that Georgia has expertise in and has Glenn Schumann who develops players better than anybody at that position. Yeah, Georgia has been interested on this one. I mean, this is a guy that everybody knew about as a true freshman at Gainesville. Now, there was some deciphering of, is this guy going to be an edge? Is this guy going to be an outside linebacker? What is he going to do? He's kind of settled in at outside linebacker, and that's probably where he needs to play, but he started out at edge. And he certainly has blossomed and developed like a 5-star should. When you put that type of rating and you start saying that this guy's going to be one of the best players in the country when he's a true freshman, I mean, you saw it if you watched our sub-episode earlier today when we were watching the film of, okay, here's him as a true freshman. Like, oh, that's him as a junior. Very easy to tell. Swole kid now, definitely formulated himself into, he looks like one of the top players in the country, pursues the hell out of the football. I mean, it just like – those things alone would tell you, Georgia would be interested in that one. So I don't think it's too far gone. But like I also mentioned of Georgia being heavily invested into the Tyler Atkinson recruitment, and then Alabama and Texas being options in this one, getting official visits, it seems like they might have a leg up on this one.
It's going to get very, very expensive. That was a given, though. That's pretty much how it is with any 5 stars. And here's where we go back to the silver lining of you missing on Jackson Cantwell, where you had this presumed however many X dollars you were going to pay him freed up now to where you can actually get seriously involved in the Xavier Griffin recruitment. You can get seriously involved. You can remain in Tyler Atkinson's recruitment. You don't have to pick and choose which one. Now, you're probably not going to land both of them at the same time. They're two very, very high-demand guys that are being pursued by lots of schools with lots of money. But the reality is now, in the silver line, like we said, is that you can go after both of these guys and you have an excellent shot at landing one of them.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is I'll be interested to see if this gets kind of into a similar situation that it was for Jared Curtis and Bo Bentley, where one of these guys might wait on the first one to fall, and then the next one will commit. And I don't know if that's going to exactly be the case because these are both top 50 players in the country. I mean, they're 5 stars and they're top players in their own right. So they may not feel the need to do that, and they shouldn't because they're both great football players, and there's a lot of football programs that would take them in a heartbeat. If they called and said, I want to commit, they would take them today.
I will also say this, though. I don't know if he's got an official recruiting or a commitment date for either of them. I would venture to guess that the Tyler Atkinson recruitment and the Xavier Griffin commitment just got dragged out a little more, just got pushed far ahead.
Sure.
Because now you have more negotiations to go through. You have more bidders. You have more, hey, there's 2 markets here. They're both being competitive. You can kind of negotiate here. Well, player X is saying this, player Y is saying that. So it's going to get very, very fuzzy within the next few months here.
Yeah, I mean, it got drawn out as soon as you saw the schools that were in the mix for this one because, I mean – you know if you follow college football and if you receive intel from anybody, but you should be receiving intel from patreon.com/Brooks Austin. But if you follow recruiting, anything like that, you know how fluid it is nowadays. You know how quickly things change. I mean, you saw it from the Jackson Cantwell recruitment where going into the end of April, it was Miami as the leader. Oh, taking a visit to Georgia and push back his commitment date. Georgia feels like the leader. Following the weekend of his visit, going into the day of his commitment, it was, Georgia's the leader. The next day, the day of his commitment, Miami jumped back out in front. They're going to be the one to land him. Like, everybody knows how fluid these things can be. And so when you have schools like Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida battling for one player, trying to figure out what's the right dollar amount, what does this kid want, how are we going to beat these other programs, what do we got to do to edge them out? Yeah.
Pause.
Yeah, big pause. My bad.
It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an elongated recruitment, I would assume. But also what we've learned is most kids, it seems like, want to be done before August, before their senior season ends. But also, these aren't kids that have to reserve a spot in a class. You're going to hold out a spot for Tyler Atkinson. You're going to hold out a spot for Xavier Griffin. If it goes down to early National Signing Day, any of those schools that I mentioned will be holding a spot open in case they get one of those two football players. Whereas, like, some of these kids, if you're a 3-star wide receiver or something like that and Ohio State has greenlit you and you can commit to them, you might go ahead and lock that one up while you can. You might go ahead and reserve your spot, but Tyler Atkinson and Xavier Griffin do not have to do that because they'll be taken no matter what.
For sure. And nevertheless, they're going to be very expensive commitments in the NIL era. And that's kind of something that leads us to our next topic of Kirby Smart was prompted on this. I believe it was on the Paul Feinbaum show on the SEC Network. Was talking about his thoughts on the NIL and gave a rather grim comment about the future of college football. I can read it now if you don't have it up, JWill.
Please do.
But he said, I just want to be able to have freshmen come in and not make more than a senior. And I'd like for other sports to be able to survive. You know, we're on the brink of probably 1 to 2 years away from a lot of schools cutting sports. Now, he's not talking about football. He's not talking about, you know, Georgia Southern saying, all right, guys, we got to shut the football program down. NIL is getting too expensive for us. We're talking lower revenue sports, softball, soccer, tennis, track, things like that that don't necessarily bring in revenue for the school. We're getting to a point where acquiring an NIL roster, acquiring a football roster, acquiring sometimes a basketball roster for other schools is becoming so expensive that you have to cut corners elsewhere. You have to say, we really need to be competitive in football, so we're going to have to shell out X amount of dollars. Unfortunately, that means we can't provide the proper resources to these teams. We're going to have to shut this down, which means that players lose scholarship opportunities. It's overall just a very negative aspect. So I think that's a rather eye-opening comment.
And I didn't see this as a negative comment from Kirby. I took this as Kirby is alerting everybody, hey, this could happen. This is what's happening. This is what's happening to our sport and other sports because of NIL and what the future of this sport is going to impact other sports. It's not Kirby being negative. It's Kirby informing people of what could possibly happen because as I see this quote release and then I go and read the comments underneath of it, I'm informed on how unaware people are of how NIL is affecting this and what revenue sharing is going to do and what's going to happen when this potential change in this sport happens because we've been saying it on this show of, well, you got to fork over $20 million when revenue sharing comes. Well, what is that going to do to your other sports? What is that going to do to baseball? What's that going to do to softball? And we've said, like, schools are probably going to have to cut sports. Some sports are going to cease to exist at schools because football is all we got because they're the ones that produce money. They're the ones that produce revenue. Softball is not producing revenue for most schools. They're just not. And that's what Kirby's saying here. I didn't take it as a negative. I took it as a, whoa, red alert, like this is what's happening. And then also on top of that, I understand why some people reacted the way that they did to Kirby saying, oh, here we go, Kirby Smart complaining about recruiting because he's losing out on Jackson Cantwell. And he makes this comment about how I wish freshmen wouldn't come in and be the highest paid player in a room. Well, it's ironic to say that when you just signed Jared Curtis, Kirby, when you just that guy's going to be the highest paid player in your room probably. But what people aren't, what Kirby is talking about specifically is Kirby Smart is doing that because he has a job to do. Kirby Smart has a standard to hold. Kirby Smart has a national title to win, titles to win, and he has to do that by putting the best team on the football field. Well, if that means we got to pay Jared Curtis that because that's what market value is, because that's what everybody else wants to offer him, because that's what we've created in NIL, is you can just pay anybody anything you want if you've got the money to do it. Well, Kirby Smart and Georgia still have to do that. They have to honor that because they're not just going to lay over and die because of sport change. That's never been what they do. They've maintained their spot of recruiting in the top 3 consistently, and you have to adapt or die. And Georgia has chosen to adapt because there's a standard at Georgia. We're one of the best teams in the country, and we're going to still act that way. But it does. You can also do that while also saying, this is messed up, this is wrong, we need to change things.
Yeah, and I hate the dismissal of and being able to just undermine what Kirby says immediately because, oh, he's just bitching. Oh, he's just upset because he can't win the recruits anymore. They did the same thing with Nick Saban back in 2020 and 2021 when he was very outspoken against this. And they're like, Nick Saban's just worried because his dynasty. He was paying players under the table, and now everyone can do it. Blah, 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 blah. Everyone's complaining. Now Nick Saban is spearheading a movement that is fixing college football. Nick Saban doesn't have a dog in the fight anymore. Nick Saban is still talking about how things are messed up in college football, and it's almost like it's not too late because the people that are complaining about, Kirby Smart's just bitching because he can't win recruiting. Nick Saban just complained because his dynasty's in trouble. Then 3 or 4 years down the line, they go, the sport's ruined. We have completely ruined the sanctity of the sport. Now, I think that there's a fine line. I think two things can be true at once. I think everyone is in support of college football players getting paid. I think that is a shame. It was a shame for as long as those guys, how they created that much revenue for a school and weren't able to see any of it. And if they did, they were punished to severe levels. That said, we have opened up the floodgates to the point where it's become bidding wars to land players before they even get on campus. And then to keep them there to the point where you've inflated the sport so much that it's taking up places for other sports. He's not lying when he says, SMU or, any team, School X is in danger of shutting down a non-revenue team, the swim team or the track team, because they simply can't afford to do this because they've allocated so many resources to acquiring a football roster. So when this starts happening, people are going to go, someone do something, please. But the reality is they were complaining that firsthand of, he's just bitching. Don't ignore what he says.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, we were okay with college football players being paid. They deservingly should be paid. What we didn't sign up for was, here's a blank check. What do you need? What do you want? What we signed up for was, Zaxby's wants to give Gunnar Stockton $1,000 or $50,000 to do ads for the rest of the calendar year. That's what we signed up for.
Hey, Johnny Manziel is the biggest name in college football. He should be able to go to autograph signings and make money for that.
He sells however many jerseys. Okay, he gets a percentage of that. That's what we signed up for. We did not sign up for this, and that's what everybody's kind of getting at because, too, it's just insane to think about what Kirby is mentioning of we're going to have this true freshman walk onto our college football team, and not just any college football team, a college football team like the Georgia Bulldogs that are top 3 in recruiting and have blue chippers everywhere and pump out 13 NFL draft picks every single year. That's what they do, but yet the true freshman is the one who's going to be making the most money. The Atlanta Falcons did not make Jalen Walker their highest paid player because they drafted him and because they wanted him at 15th overall. No, you have to go through 3 or 4 years on your rookie contract, and if you perform the way that we slotted you in the draft, then you get that pay bump. Then you can become the highest paid player on the roster. But you don't just walk into this new team and be a fresh face and say, I make more money than all of y'all. That's not how any sport works, but this one it does. For some reason, that's how we made it work because we did it just everything got expedited. And it got rushed, and now we're paying for it, and now other sports might be paying for it.
Mm-hmm. JWill, I think after a heated discussion such as that, it's always a nice time to take a wheel break. What do you think?
Ooh, I do love spinning the wheel. It does calm me down a little bit.
All right, let's take a nice relaxing spin. Ooh, see it spinning, JWill. Do you feel tranquil now?
I do.
Let's see what we get to land on.
It's like meditation.
All right. What's the most plausible worst-case scenario for 2025? Whereas now, obviously, the worst-case scenario is you lose every game.
Mm-hmm.
That's not exactly plausible. So what do you think is the most plausible? Do you walk away from the season and go, well, that was about as bad of a season as we could have had in 2025?
Okay. So I would say the absolute worst-case scenario that I guess could happen would be Georgia goes 9-3. I guess that would be it. Like that because I don't ever see 8-4 next to Georgia with Kirby Smart as a head coach. I really don't. I don't see it playing that way.
I'm gonna say 8-4. Now, it's worst case scenario.
I know.
Worst case.
Plausible though.
Plausible. Here's what I think it is. Georgia Tech's not a rollover beat them now.
Sure.
You've struggled. You've had 1-score games against them 2 years in a row now. That's one to keep your eye on. Ole Miss, we'd have to imagine, is a team that you're going to be able to beat, but that's not necessarily a game you're guaranteed to win. We saw how it went last year. Alabama and Texas are 2 games we just talked about that you could very, very easily lose.
Mm-hmm.
That's 4 games now. Game number 5 that I'm really worried about. Neyland Stadium, week 3. A Tennessee team that's probably still got a lot of mojo around them. They're going to be bought into this Aguilar guy if they are. It's going to be Gunnar Stockton's first start in an SEC road environment. And by the way, they're checkering the kneeling.
Yeah.
That's a losable game. Again, this is worst case scenario. This is disaster mode. But of those 5 games, I could see you losing 4 of them.
If Georgia goes 8-4, of course, those are definitely the hardest games that Georgia has, and there's certainly situations where they could lose. But if Georgia's going to lose 4 games, I'd also probably tell you there was a significant injury somewhere.
Probably
That would probably also have to play a factor. So, and that's plausible. I mean, it's football. That could very well happen. So if that's the case, then yeah, 8-4 plausible. But I would say that you could almost bank on that the worst record that you could picture in a regular season format under Kirby Smart would probably be 9-3 in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
I mean, if you go 8-4, people are going to start going, is Kirby Smart done? Is he washed? So we'll spin it one more
they're
time.
doing it now.
We'll spin it one more
They're
time.
doing it now, and he just won an SEC title. So, yeah, they have no problems doing it after an 8-4 season.
Ooh, would you rather? All right, JWill, would you rather have a Heisman season from Nate Frazier or Zachariah Branch?
Oh. Here's the thing. Nate Frazier going to have a great season no matter what, in my opinion.
I would agree with that.
Bottom line, that guy's probably going to rush for 800 yards. That's kind of how I picture it. Maybe 750 if you want to go that low. So I think he's going to have a great season no matter what. I think Zachariah Branch is going to have a good season, but I could see Zachariah Branch's first year at Georgia being 560 yards or 620 yards or somewhere around that number. I see that happening. So a Heisman winning season for Nate Frazier would probably be, 1,600 rushing yards?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere around there, 22 touchdowns. Like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Some stat line like that, which would be fantastic, and you'd be very successful if that was his stat line. But I'm already expecting a really, really good year from Nate Frazier. If you tell me Zachariah Branch is going to go for 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns, that's a difference maker. That is Georgia's offense was borderline unstoppable if that's what the stat line he put up. And Gunnar Stockton achieved and overachieved anything and everything that was set upon him. So I would say I'm definitely taking a Zachariah Branch Heisman season because it feels like you get way more out of that than what you would potentially of a Nate Frazier Heisman season.
And not just that, we've seen the avenue, for as hard as it is for a running back to win the Heisman, we've seen the avenue that wide receivers have to go through. You have to make wild plays. You have to do things on special teams. You have all of those combined into one. Like Zachariah Branch winning the Heisman for Georgia would be absolutely insane. And I think honestly, and I hate to say this because it seems like it's a negative towards Nate Frazier, it would be more exciting. It would be more exciting to watch a guy light it up and have 1,000 receiving yards. Oh, and by the way, he returns 2 or 3 punts for a touchdown, or he has a kick return for a touchdown, or he does things like that, or they let him throw a touchdown pass like they do with Mike Bobo. Every once in a while they'll have one of those plays. So stuff like that, I would go the Zachariah Branch route as well. But the idea of a Georgia running back getting back to New York and winning the Heisman.
Oh, I mean, a Nate Frazier Heisman season would be absolutely electric. To picture what the amount of numbers that he would have to put up and what his play style would be doing so, it'd be electric. It'd be awesome to watch. Both would be awesome to watch. So if you got a wide receiver from Georgia leading the Heisman race and he's doing so by dubbing people up on routes and then also returning some kicks as well, that would be electric as well.
Nate Frazier, Zachariah Branch, would you say, JWill, those are probably top 100 players in the sport of college football?
Certainly a case. I mean, there's certainly a case that Nate Frazier and Zachariah Branch are top 100 players.
Well, you'd be wrong.
What?
According to On3, neither of them are in the top 100 players, and that brings us to our next segment. On3 is out here disrespecting the Georgia Bulldogs roster. Now, I know that there's kind of this stigma that, Kirby Smart lies to his players about how much you're being doubted, about everyone's so low on Georgia this year, and everyone says, no, we're not. Georgia's one of the top 5 teams. On3 had a list today where they ranked top 100 college football players, and there were just 2 Bulldogs on that list. Neither one of them cracked the top 90.
That's the craziest part, is Kristen Miller and C.J. Allen, rightfully so, landing their names on this list, but we're not inside the top 90. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, Kristen Miller very well could end up being a first-round draft pick next year. He's you could make the case that he's a top 50 player in college football. I mean, he was dominant for Georgia last year. The most consistent and disruptive defensive lineman Georgia had last year at Georgia with some guys that just went into the NFL. So it's just crazy to me, man. I don't understand what it is. I guess it's like because there's questions around Gunnar Stockton, we're just going to question the rest of the team?
It's a combination of a couple of things. I think number one is that, yes, Gunnar Stockton has 1.5 games, excluding 2023, because I don't really count that either, has 1.5 games of playing fine quarterback play. We've been over that. You can't really sell sexy. It's not that. I'm fine with him not being on the top 100 list. Nate Frazier had a couple of issues last year with turnovers. He was a freshman. KJ Bolden, very, very good safety. Should at least be in the top 100. Dalen Everett might not be the best corner in college football. I would put him in the top 100.
Yeah.
Guys like that. So I think this stems from the fact of a couple of things. One, everyone was so high on Georgia last year, and they were so uncharacteristic themselves. The wide receiver drops, the loss to Alabama on the for a half getting absolutely bent over by Alabama on the road.
Yeah.
Then you get manhandled by Ole Miss. And then for all accounts, Notre Dame handles you despite the fact that a special teams play in the late second half, first half turnover were the reason that they won that game against the backup quarterback. Regardless, people are very, very low on Georgia this year. Then you go into the offseason and say, all right, Georgia Bulldogs, where's the guaranteed first-round picks? They're not there. Mykel Williams isn't on the roster. Malachi Starks isn't on the roster. We've said it before, though. They will show up, most likely. I would be shocked if Georgia doesn't have at least 2 players in the first round this year. At least a player in the first round. That will definitely happen. But casually you look at it right now and go, this roster isn't what it used to be. You look at what they did. They weren't the team that we thought they were last year. I'm out on Georgia. Now, you and I both know there are more than 2 players inside the top 100 for the best players in college football. However, it brings us to a point of, I get it now. I can justify it. I don't believe it. I don't agree with it at all.
I just am at the point of, if you're going to put together one of these top 100 lists, first off, to act like you know everything about 100 players of college football is absurd. So, these lists are very hard to do, and there's going to be errors, and you're going to miss some people, so I understand that. But a school like Georgia, who are, again, I reiterated, I talked about it just a second ago, it's consistently recruits in the top 3 every single year. I believe their roster this year is the highest blue chip ratio that Kirby Smart has ever had as a head coach. I mean, the fact that they only have 2 players on a top 100 list and only 2 of them, both of them, are outside of the top 90, that's where I have concerns. And the fact that KJ Bolden was a meaningful contributor at Georgia, of all places Georgia, as a true freshman, would indicate that he's one of the best players in college football. And I know that he didn't have a season that would be memorable enough to most. For an outsider, I'd be
and
like,
he didn't do the Malachi Starks where you make an acrobatic interception your first play, and then the entire country can go, ooh. But he was a very, very good player. One of the top safeties in the SEC.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think you can make the case that Raylan Wilson is a top 100 player in college football. I think that's not crazy to say either. Chris Cole exploded onto the scene last year. I know that it was somewhat of limited contributions because he didn't start every game. He didn't get meaningful playing time in every game, but that dude's a freak, and it seems like people are projecting him to be the next freak at Georgia. At least ESPN is. They're saying that he could be the next Jalen Walker. So it's just weird to me. It is. And it's weird because this is the first time in a while that it's been like this.
I have another theory on this. Georgia has not traditionally in the past, other than having, Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel, DeAndre Swift, has not been known for being these never having the skill players that make the difference.
No.
Georgia's never had the flashy corner coming into the season. Even before 2023, Kamari Lassiter wasn't a proven, finished product. Keely Ringo wasn't that in 2021 when he came in, or 2022.
Yeah.
So guys like that. Now, Malachi Starks was Malachi Starks. Mykel Williams was Mykel Williams. But the meat and potatoes of what Georgia's roster has always been has been on the interior defensive line, the linebacker core, which, by the way, C.J. Allen's in that list. So my theory is that to the naked eye, to the rough observer of casual college football fans, you look at this and you go, receiver core. All right, it's Georgia receiver core. They've never done anything special. Running back, okay, they're returning that one freshman guy. Quarterback, Gunnar Stockton, he might be good. Safety, well, they lost Malachi Starks, and they're starting 2 guys that didn't really do anything spectacular last year. Dalen never had a good game against Texas, but other than that, they got torched by Alabama. They lost to Ole Miss. There were times where the secondary of Georgia looked bad last year. So from afar. I'm trying to look at it through someone who doesn't watch Georgia football,
Oh, yeah.
who hasn't seen every single game multiple times throughout their life, because I think it's crazy, but I'm trying to justify it.
And the justification is that what you just mentioned of a typical Georgia team has dominant lines of scrimmage. Like they have offensive linemen that you're talking about in the preseason where they could be first-round picks. You have your Tate Ratledge, or you have your Broderick Jones, or you have your Dylan Fairchild, or you have your Jared Wilson, or whoever it is. That offensive line is usually littered with future NFL prospects, and they have really good offensive linemen, but people haven't seen too much of Micah Morris. And what people have seen of Ernest Green and Monroe Freeling, or what they think they remember of those two football players, is them getting beat last year and them struggling last year. And people don't know too much about Drew Bobo and Daniel Calhoun, or whoever's going to be play guard, or Juan Gaston, who just got on campus. People don't know a lot about them. And then going on to the defensive side, I mean, we say it all the time when we say biggest questions for Georgia of who's going to play alongside Christian Miller, who's going to be that other disruptor. Is it going to be Xavier McLeod? Well, Xavier McLeod didn't play too much last year because he was injured. And the edge room has some questions because you did go out and get Elo Mendoza, and you do have Gabe Harris, and you do have Quintavious Johnson. Like, you do have those guys, but those are guys that people are not too familiar with, where usually you're going into a season where you know a lot about Georgia's defensive line, because this time last year it was, we know who Warren Brinson is. We know who Nazir Stackhouse is. We know who Michael Williams is. Like, we know who all those guys are, whereas you don't have that this year. And people feel, and I imagine as an outsider, again, and this is coming from people that watch Georgia every single Saturday. We cover them. We go to the games. We watch the games. We watch them during the offseason. We cover them in the offseason. This is coming from those types of people.
Mm-hmm.
So for an outsider to look at Georgia's roster and really not have any recognizable names, I do get it. I completely understand.
And I think maybe it would be better off if you had some media outlet just come out and say, look, we trust Georgia. We think Georgia's going to be good. We believe in Georgia. That said, there's not enough proven commodities for us to justify that. It seems like everyone's trying to make the case that Georgia's fallen off a cliff, and that Kirby Smart has lost all being of what it takes to be a good coach, which just seems so egregious. Now, a lot of the media is very down on Georgia, and a lot of them, have negative things to say about the players, the coaches. They're not going to win. They're not the team that they once were. However, Vegas is right there up them and still seems to believe in them in accordance with that, JWill. We saw the SEC win totals today, and the Bulldogs, while it's only 9.5 wins, are at the top of that list.
10.5. They're
at
10.5.
Excuse me.
Georgia is at 10.5 wins in the SEC this year, which is tied with Alabama and Texas. So everybody's casting their doubts. And now, I say casting their doubts, projecting them at 10.5 wins, saying that Georgia could very easily go 10-2, which I think is plausible. Very
understandable.
That's understandable completely. People who rank Georgia outside the top 5 or put them at 8, they could still achieve both of those things. They could be 10-2 and be the 8th best team in the country. So saying that Vegas is a believer in Georgia, but I think that where the phrasing of they are a believer in Georgia is by saying they're tied for first with the best odds to have the best record in the SEC. Oh, it is 9.5. You were right. That's my bad. 9.5 wins for Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. That's also saying Georgia's going to be competing for an SEC title this year. They're going to be in contention for it. When it comes down to the end of November, you're going to be talking about, is Georgia going to be in it? Is Alabama going to be in it? Is Texas going to be in it? So that's where that comes from. But obviously Vegas is saying Georgia is still one of the best teams in the SEC.
Yeah, and look, 9.5 wins is an alarming number. I think we 2 years removed of it being 11.5 of basically, is Georgia going to go undefeated or not? Those days are over. I think we need to, if you haven't gotten that grasp yet of college football, the days of going 12-0 in the SEC are over. Unless everyone else around you has a really, really down year where you get a pool of an easy schedule where you don't have to play Alabama, you don't have to play Texas, you don't have to play Ole Miss, you don't have to play Tennessee. All teams are going to be ranked inside the top 25 when you play them, barring disaster. You're not going 12-0 anymore.
No, you're not.
The days of where you look back and go, man, I miss our Georgia teams that went, those 21 and 22 rosters were so good. I hate to break it to you. The 21 and 22 rosters with this schedule would probably be 11-1 or 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the 2023 roster almost lost 2 games simply because the 22 roster almost lost to Missouri.
I mean, you could make the argument that it's a good thing that Georgia doesn't play in the East anymore, considering what South Carolina has been the last 2 years. Like, you wouldn't feel good going up against Lenore Sellers. No matter what you think about him, you would not feel good about it because I already can see the comments. I already know what fans will be talking about. Oh, we don't play good against mobile quarterbacks. I don't know. Lenore Sellers, that one's scary a little bit. So South Carolina's on the up and up. Florida's on the up and up. Who knows where they would have put Texas and Oklahoma? One of those schools would have been put in the division as well. It's like even if divisions were still a thing, you're not running through it like you were at the time when you were running off back-to-back national titles, or even before that, because you were all the way up here, and the rest of the SEC, like we were sitting here talking about, is Kentucky going to compete with Georgia for the Eastern Division title? And Kentucky was a good football program during those years, but they were not a great football team. Nobody was putting them on the level of Georgia.
Kirby Smart built up his I'll call it a dynasty for now because I can't think of another word for it. Kirby Smart built up the dynasty from 2017 to 2022 based on two things. We're more talented than you, so we're just going to beat the shit out of you. And if we don't beat the shit out of you, we're deeper than you, so we're going to pull away and win in the fourth quarter. And time again, that worked, with the exception of a 2019 fiasco in South Carolina and basically every time you played Alabama. You were the more talented team, and if you weren't, you were the more depth team, and you won in the fourth quarter. You don't have as much talent because it's more dispersed all because of the transfer portal and NIL being able to recruit players, and you're not as deep because of the same reason. So the two big advantages that you had, which, by the way, most great teams have been diminished. Now, Georgia's still going to be more talented than 90 to 95% of the teams they play. They're still going to be deeper than 90 to 95% of the teams they play. That's why they were able to beat Kentucky last year. That's why they were able to beat Georgia Tech in overtimes last year. That's why they were able to beat, name any close game they've been in the last 5 years. It's also why they lost to Ole Miss this year. It's also why they lost to Alabama. Things like that where depth becomes an issue. Talent becomes an issue. The margins are thinner than ever, and I think fans need to understand that. So when you see 9-3, yeah, that's alarming, but then you look at it, you're still at the top.
Yeah, and I see a comment saying that Texas could go 12-0. Well, we can sit here and say that Georgia could go 12-0 or Texas could go 12-0 because they are a good football team. So you could think and imagine of a world in the offseason where Texas and Georgia could go undefeated. You could make the case for it because Georgia's already beat Texas twice. Alabama, that Georgia finally gets them at home this year. Ole Miss not going to be what they were last year. Tennessee, Kirby Smart's figured out that offense. Georgia Tech, we'll see what they are. That one's not even at Georgia Tech. It's in the bins. Georgia plays well in the bins. Like, you could draw up all these scenarios where, yeah, Georgia could go 12-0, but the odds are against you, especially for Texas' schedule. I mean, you open up with Ohio State week 1 at Ohio State. That automatically says likely not happening. On top of having to go to Georgia, and you close out with Texas A&M, and Florida's no slappy. Oklahoma's getting better. Like, the odds are against you. Now that what the SEC is, now it is what it is, it's against you. So, yeah, we could sit here and say that, yes, Arch Manning could lead Texas to a 12-0 season, or Kirby Smart could lead Georgia to an undefeated season, but it is unlikely that happens.
Harder than ever before. What are some of the other odds in that league? Because I'm curious. If they've got Georgia at 9.5,
there's some really interesting ones. Like one that popped off to me: South Carolina 7.5.
Huh. Now, South Carolina closes out the schedule on like they're going to start 5-0.
They got some brutal.
But
games.
Their last 7 games, like LSU, Ole Miss, Bama,
LSU on the road. Alabama, that one will be at home. Oklahoma is on the schedule as well. Texas A&M is on the schedule. Ole Miss is on the schedule. And, yeah, you're right. Like, all 5 of those teams are, like, in the second half of the schedule.
Yeah, so if you're buying stock in South Carolina, I would dump it, like, week 5 because they're going to be very – like we just talked about. They're going to be 5-0, and they're projected for 7.5 wins. That's what I'm talking about. Like, go look at the first 5 games. I think the hardest game they play is Virginia Tech. And after that, it's like, all right, we'll win all these games. But the next 7 are brutal for them. So 7.5 is interesting, but it makes a lot of sense. What's next?
The other one that was surprising to me was – oh, crap, I clicked off the tweet. Rookie mistake. That's on me, man. Here, I'm already back to it. Florida was at 7.5, so they're tied with South Carolina.
Again, another one of these things where – they're going to start out strong. I think they have a really good chance of beating Miami, but then you look at the back half of that, they're going to get someone this year, and that's what 7-5 or 8-4 indicates. Like, they play too many good teams to not lose to or beat all of them. So it's very interesting in there. But after that, I don't know. So basically, are those the? So wait, is there a drop off from 9.5 to 7.5?
No, it goes Alabama, Georgia, Texas at 9.5. LSU at 8.5, tied with Ole Miss and Tennessee, which that's rather interesting to me as well.
Very interesting.
Having those 3 teams because, but again, it's not crazy to think about because I do believe Tennessee and Ole Miss are going to have a bit of a step back, but saying that they're 9-3, I don't think that's crazy. I think that they're good enough to do that in the SEC this year. And then it goes Auburn and Texas A&M at 8. So Auburn and Texas A&M ahead of Florida and South Carolina.
That's very interesting.
Oklahoma's down at 7, not 7.5, 7. That's the fifth worst odds in the SEC.
Fifth worst is 7?
Yeah. And then it goes from 7, this is your drop-off, to Arkansas 5.5, Vanderbilt 5.5, Kentucky 4.5, and Mississippi State 3.5.
Is Mark Stoops fired after this year?
I don't know.
4-8, 5-7? Like 5-7 is beating the odds according to Kentucky. According to Vegas, at least.
It just tells you, like, for these rosters that really seek out these transfer quarterbacks to kind of be their saving grace. And look, I understand it, because if you're Kentucky, you're not hoping to get a 5-star quarterback or even like a high-rated 4-star most of the time, unless it's in the transfer portal. Like South Carolina, the reason that they're in the position that they are is because they found a 3-star quarterback in their backyard that nobody else wanted, that they wanted really badly, and it panned out for them. And the traits paid off, and the ceiling is continuing to grow like they hoped it would. But South Carolina has been in this position before where let's go get Spencer Rattler and see what can happen, because before Spencer Rattler, it was a mixed shift of like
Luke Doty. We got a former tight end and GA out there throwing passes for us.
Yeah, exactly. So like it wasn't working out. And Kentucky is one of these schools, but when you miss out on them, when you go and get Brock Vandagriff, who was a former 5-star, like you did your homework, you did the right thing, or what people thought was the right thing. You went and got a guy with traits that just needed some time and needed some reps. That one didn't pay off for you. Well, now you went from, again, competing with Georgia in the East, or what many would deem competing with Georgia in the East, to now 5 wins. That's kind of what we're looking at right now. And Zach Calzada, starting quarterback, former Incan Word, starting quarterback, former Texas A&M starting quarterback.
God, it's Cam Ward.
But 5 years removed from Calzada beating Bama at Texas A&M removed.
All right, Joe, let's spin this wheel again, dude. I'm itching to get some more wheel topics up here.
Let's do it.
Only down to 3 now.
Running out of topics?
Don't worry. We got enough. Name that Bulldog. All right, Brooks isn't in studio, and honestly, he hasn't been the best at these categories just because he wasn't an avid Bulldog watcher like us. I'm interested to see how if you get this one. All right, hint number 1. He played safety for Georgia.
Okay.
He was known as a hard hitter.
Okay.
Do you have a guess yet?
Well, that's a wide range.
Yeah, I'm keeping it wide for now.
Okay. Hard hit. Bakari Rambo.
No, it was not Bakari Rambo.
Okay.
He once played for the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh, God. Once played for the Atlanta Falcons? I feel like I'm going to be an idiot now. Once played for the Atlanta Falcons. Played safety?
I'll tell you, it didn't last long, and he was undrafted.
Didn't last long. Undrafted. Hard-hitting safety. Falcons. Georgia. Hard-hitting. I'm trying to make sure I don't look at chat. Let me go ahead and click off of this so I don't get any hints.
Yeah, no cheating.
Man, like the hard-hitting safeties that come to mind for me for Atlanta are like Keanu Neal. Like,
He don't think Atlanta
like didn't play?
Did not play.
Okay, so like
But he was on the Falcons roster.
And this is, can you give me an era? Like
Mark Richt era.
Mark Richt era. Okay. Safety.
Mark Richt era, early Kirby Smart era.
Malcolm Parrish.
Good guess. Not Malcolm Parrish. Hit number 4 might give you help.
Oh, before you do that, Quincy Mauger.
Hit number 4. His name was reportedly mispronounced throughout his entire college career.
Is Mauger, right?
Mauger.
Quincy Mauger. And then he ultimately ended up changing it to?
I believe so.
To honor his mother's heritage?
Yes.
I want to say?
Yes.
Yeah, Quincy Mauger.
War number 20. I think I remember him most for, I don't remember what hit it was, but he was always one of these guys that just came out. The reason I remember him being on the Falcons roster, he had an interception against the, at the time, Redskins in the preseason.
Oh.
And I was like, look at this. The Georgia Bulldog's going to make a name for himself. Got cut before the regular season started.
Most people why you would remember him is because anytime you see like the highlight clips posted or like an edit made where it's like, I miss these days of college football, where there was like pre-targeting college football, his hit against South Carolina is almost always in the mix.
Yes,
and
that's
it's him laying
the one.
out. I don't even know who it was, but I mean, just absolutely decked a dude on the sideline.
Yeah, Quincy Mauger was an early casualty of the targeting era. Because 2013, 2014 was when it first got introduced. Tough times. But,
Yeah.
All right, we'll spin the wheel one more time, and then we can do a final spin to close out the show. Down to 2 topics now. I think trivia.
We got another topic, too, that we can hit after this wheel spin and then save the other one.
Hey, man, it's up to you.
We got a fun topic.
You're at the UJ Auburn versus 2023. This was the first game that me and Jonathan ever covered together in the booth.
One of the last ones we got to cover together. We didn't get to do one last year.
You're right. We were solo.
We were going solo dolo with Brooks every time.
But for those who don't remember, this was the Jordan Hare game in Auburn. Really, really tough. This is Brock Bowers' game.
Yeah.
Auburn started out to a really, really good start. Got the first touchdown, I believe. We were like, whoa, that's unusual. Georgia doesn't usually go down in these games. I believe was it Peyton Thorne who was the quarterback?
Yes.
Peyton Thorne had like a 65-yard run against Georgia. Oscar Delp had a crucial fumble. I believe Dejon Edwards even had a fumble that was taken back. This was also the first game you got Ladd McConkey back. He was dealing with a back injury early in the season. I'm trying to think of what else jumps out to me. Obviously, the Malachi Starks interception seal it. Brock Bowers going back-to-back on one-handed snags. One got called back.
I remember coming out of halftime, Georgia had the back-to-back fumbles, but I believe the second one was recovered by Oscar Delp. He dropped it, then picked it up himself, if I remember this correctly. But this was right after Dejon fumbled the ball, and it was like, this is how we're starting the second half after you just struggled against – and Auburn was unranked, I believe.
They were. This was one of the first
stunner.
This was the first year of the Hugh Freeze era, correct me if I'm wrong.
It was, because I remember going into that game, and after that game, we were like – good on Hugh Freeze for implementing a run game with Peyton Thorne. I remember us interviewing the Georgia players after the game, asking like, did they do anything that kind of caught you off guard? Like, yeah, we didn't expect them to use the quarterback like they did. Like, no one was expecting Peyton Thorne to keep the ball out of the backfield and run for 60 yards, but he did. And Auburn was doing everything right until Carson Beck and Mike Bobo and Brock Bowers were like, oh, we have number 19 on the team.
Yeah, let's just give it to number 19.
Let's just give it to number 19. And then for the next 2 series, it was exactly that of. How many times can we give Brock Bowers the football? And he did something special every single time.
I also remember this being the unfortunate vindication for fans of this is why we can't have Mike Bobo. We never had this in 2022. Go watch the Missouri game. We never dealt with this in 21. Go watch the Alabama game. I mean, games like that where people were hyperactively looking for a reason to say Mike Bobo sucks. This was the first main reason to have it. But nevertheless, very fun experience. I wish the box was open, though, because that stadium was rocking, but where we were sounded relatively quiet. We got to sneak down towards the end there and get on the crowd when, last quarter of the game. But
Auburn sticks you in the corner pocket. That's what they do.
They do.
You're pretty far from the action, and the action is going away from you most of the time. But you are right next to the scoreboard, so you hear everything going on with that thing. But it kind of does drown out some of the fan noise. But that was an electric football game. It was definitely one to remember. Like, in 50 years, when you're telling your kids about Brock Bowers, you're going to say, let me take you back to the 2023 Auburn-Georgia game. And you just go show them the game highlights, and you say, that's what he was.
Also, most rushable field in college football.
Oh, yeah.
I got down. So, Athens, Georgia, Sanford Stadium, there are 4 exit points to the field, and it's a chain link fence that you have someone constantly guarding it. Getting on that stadium is impossible. Jordan Hare, there is a brick wall that is probably 3 foot high, and that's it. That is what keeps you from running onto the field.
It is belt high.
It literally. So when you go back and you watch the kick six and you see, oh my God, they got on the field so quickly. That's why. There's no shrubs to jump over. There's no hedges. You hop over a wall and you are on to the football field.
The best way I can describe this is to the lack of security. So Kirby and I are on the field before, during warm-ups, taking pictures and all that stuff. And, we're in a new stadium and we really don't know where we're going. So we eventually are just like, well, let's just walk through the stands. And there we are. We just hop over a gate, walk up through the stands, and find our way to the press box. There was nobody to say, oh, no, don't do that. Oh, media, go this way. It was just find your way around. Go sit where you want. Go wherever you want. We don't really care. That's kind of how.
Do you remember where we ended up?
I remember after the game where we ended up, and that was very weird.
I remember the first time we tried to go down the field, because remember, we went to the field, started taking pictures of everything, went up to the box, set our stuff down. We're like, you know what, we've got some time. Let's go back down there. Couldn't figure out how to do it. We're walking through different corners. We end up in the recruiting lounge.
Yeah.
The two of us just walk in and like 4 and 5 stars looking at us. Coaches like all turn their heads and like, the media's supposed to be here?
Which is a no-no. It's not supposed to happen.
Media and recruits,
not supposed to happen.
Now, we're 2 years removed from the instance, and don't worry, we didn't talk to anyone, but it was just like, oh, shit.
It was like,
again, no one guarding the doors. We walked out onto the field, started taking pictures. So, if you're ever trying to sneak onto the field, Jordan Hare in Auburn is the one to do it.
If you got an itching for some rule breaking, make the trip down there this year.
Absolutely.
All right, let's hit our final segment. This is just one that I thought of because Georgia matches up against Arch Manning this year, and they have some history with one another because Texas and Georgia were like the final two teams. Alabama was kind of in the mix, but it really felt like Georgia and Texas, and Arch ultimately picks Texas, and so it feels like a bit of a rematch, especially the fact that he has to come to Athens this year and play against Georgia. I was just starting to think of, like, what were the best rematches, like quote-unquote rematches, that Georgia got over the years with a player that they had some history with or a coach that they had some history with. So, for example, my first pick in this is Zach Mettenberger versus Georgia in 2023, especially game. The fact that it was Aaron Murray versus Zach, where those two guys were the ones kind of battling it out. I know that Aaron's told many stories of him and Zach battling out at practice. Zach ultimately gets in some trouble, ends up at LSU, but provided one of the most electric football games ever. Certainly one of the most memorable football games ever.
Absolutely. It's a candid moment for me as a Georgia Bulldog fan. I remember that. Great rematch. Also, one of the more interesting, I think the 40s is the perfect score for a college football game. It's a combination of exciting moments and quick changes. Like there was so much that happened in that game that it's just like, man, that was exciting. So very fond memory of that. I have one that I'm saving, but I'm going to go Shane Beamer in 21 and 22. Obviously for the first year as a head coach where they were like, Shane, this was after Georgia beat the shit out of him in Athens. Like, Shane, what did Georgia do differently with you? And he's got sweat on his hair. And he's they had 35 stars and 17 future draft picks. What'd you expect for us to happen? It was kind of like, Shane Beamer's got a little bit of fire to him. Then in 22, obviously with the another Brock Bowers game, had 3 touchdowns in that game, I believe. But obviously this is the iconic first down MFer from Kirby Smart after they went for it on 4th down, and Georgia eventually took over on downs. So that's a big rematch game for me.
This one would be one that Georgia fans really like, but it's certainly memorable because especially what happened after this game. Georgia versus Florida in 2022, better known as Georgia versus Brenton Cox.
Did you know he transferred to Florida?
Yeah,
Crazy.
I did. Crazy, isn't it? If you didn't know that.
It's such a niche joke at this point. People aren't even going to get it.
I think anybody listening this far in the show, you probably get that one, or at least I hope you do. But, again, Brenton Cox obviously was a 5-star that committed to Georgia, played 1 year, elected to transfer to Florida, and therefore Georgia wanted their revenge every single time, specifically the fans, because there were some not-so-nice things said from Brenton Cox about Georgia.
Yep.
But this game specifically was the one where I believe it was Kenny McIntosh runs into the end zone, scores a touchdown for Georgia, and Brenton Cox proceeds to get, best way to put it, mugged by Georgia's offensive line. And he decides to throw a punch at the end of it like a coward. And then he was rightfully so dismissed from the football team after that game. So it was like the final hoorah. Georgia fans got their ultimate revenge on him.
The old crash out. Next one I'm going to go to is one of my least favorite Georgia memories and one of my more fond Georgia memories. I think people forget that Nick Marshall was on that Georgia roster ahead of the 2013 season. Obviously, we know how 2013 went. I'm not going to get into that. But that ass whipping in 2014 and kind of the second introduction to Nick Chubb and the cementing of like, oh, this is a guy for us was a lot of fun. It was also the return of Todd Gurley. I don't want to talk about that either, but one of the more exciting games to be a part of up until about fourth quarter.
Yeah.
The first 45 minutes of that game, chef's kiss.
It was. This is just a good little shout out to Georgia versus Brock Vandegrift and Pop last year.
Yeah, shout
getting
out.
to play them because it's very, very rarely do Georgia fans have like little to no, or college football fans in general, not even individualizing Georgia fans, college football fans in general. Very rarely do they not have some type of ill will towards a player that transferred out of their program because they feel like that they made the wrong decision or they left too early or whatever the case may be. But those are two players that Georgia fans still love to this day, or still like at least to this day. So getting to play against them one more time, I think that was just a cool feeling that you got to see the reuniting of those guys. But I'll jump to this next one. And I'm sorry if I make your skin crawl a little bit by mentioning this man's name a little bit, Dog fans, but Georgia versus Todd Grantham. Now, they got rematches against Grantham quite a few times, but the Belk Bowl game where Nick Chubb rushes for like 230 yards and Todd Grantham's defense at Louisville literally could not do anything to stop them. I mean, it was just like all the pain that you caused us, all the time that we had to go, 3rd and Grantham, here we go. This is it, giving up a first down. And more times or not, they were right. Most of the time they were right. They would get a first down. Like, that was just a satisfying feeling. Now, there was a Florida game, too, where he was the defensive coordinator, and I think Georgia ended up going like 14 of 18 on 3rd down conversions.
I believe that was the 2019
I want to say so.
game, because I believe, like, for as slow of a game that was, Jake Fromm played really good. It was coming off of the South Carolina loss, and everyone was like, this guy sucks, get him out of here. Jake Fromm played very solid football. That game-sealing first down to Eli Wolf was also the Brian Herrion catch game.
It was the diving play that he made.
All right, I've got two more. My next one, this one in the long run might have not worked out for you, but it was a nice rematch for the time being. 2014 versus Deshaun Watson against Clemson. He came in, played really well, but Georgia ended up dominating that game. I believe the final score is 45-21.
Yeah.
We obviously know what Deshaun Watson went on to do for the rest of his career in college. I'm not talking about
You know what's crazy is that when Brock Bowers was here, we could have been comparing him to Deshaun Watson. That's what we could have been doing. Had he came to Georgia, could have been talking about Deshaun Watson was the greatest tight end at Georgia, but instead it's Brock Bowers. You look at me like you have no idea what I'm talking about.
I was just like trying to figure out how Brock Bowers and Deshaun Watson tie together.
So it was
especially in today's era, but
it was believed that Georgia was recruiting Deshaun Watson to be a tight end, not a quarterback.
They went with Bryce Ramsey instead. They said, this guy can punt.
Yeah, punting's way better. So that's what my joke was of. Deshaun could have came here and been the best tight end until Brock Bowers got here.
And my final, and this is my absolute favorite rematch. This was on the heels of the Dobbs nail boot, which I was in attendance for. This is on the heels of being spurned by everyone leaving after, Todd Grantham went to Louisville. But I don't know if you remember this. The 2017 Tennessee game where Georgia wins 41-0. Do you remember the first touchdown of that game?
I know it was an interception.
Interception first play.
The first touchdown wasn't the I'm assuming this had to do with, was Eli Wolf involved?
No.
Okay.
Subsequent play. Javon Wims absolutely dunks on Tennessee cornerback Shaq Wiggins.
Oh, you want to talk about a blast from the past.
Shaq Wiggins, who transferred to Louisville after Todd Grantham's departure and somehow ended up at Tennessee. Had a really good freshman season with Georgia in 2014, but pieced out. Seeing Javon Wims dunk on that after everything that we went through in 2016 with Tennessee and 2015, one of the more satisfying rematches moments of my life.
Shaq Wiggins. All right, my final one, and this one was just I think this was just a cool moment to watch, and it was, again, one of these moments where it was just kind of satisfying for both sides of Georgia loses Dan Lanning, he becomes the head coach of Oregon, and they end up getting to play against one another in the first week. Now, it ended up being an ass-whooping, and Dan Lanning quickly learned, got some work to do.
Them dogs is hell.
Them dogs are hell, and they're still going to be really good this year. But just a cool moment of Kirby getting like one of his first disciples or students, whatever you want to call it, getting to make that jump to be a head coach. They match up against one another in the first game, and just like a reuniting of that. I'm like, man, like this is how far we've gotten into the Kirby Smart run at Georgia, where we got one of his guys being the head coach of a really powerful football program, and now he's doing really cool things there. And I'm sure that we we will likely get another matchup between those two eventually, sometime down the road in the playoffs or something like that. But I thought that one was just a cool one.
Both of those instances are nice to me because it's like you get the former assistant that comes back and it's like, oh, the Kirby Smart versus the assistant. Kirby just manhandles him. Did the same thing with Sam Pittman in 21 with Arkansas.
Oh yeah,
just like a very signifies to me like, yeah, Kirby's still daddy.
For those saying like no 2021 natty, these are like specifically people that Georgia played against that had Georgia ties. So like Nick Saban, while Kirby Smart and him have a lengthy of relationship together, like there's no Georgia ties there. Like Nick Saban was not a Georgia guy, and I mean you could have thrown in there like their Jermaine Burton one, but that was a 2023 natty, and no Georgia fan really wants to talk about that.
Yeah,
so
SEC championship.
But yeah, so it was like someone that had Georgia ties that ended up on another team, and Georgia got some revenge, but there's not really revenge against Dan Lanning or anything like that.
All right, JWill, we have 5 minutes left on the JWill and Kirby show left today. I want to leave you with, there's only one topic left on the wheel, so there's no point in spinning it. UGA trivia.
Oh.
Can you name me every player to score a touchdown in the 2021 Orange Bowl?
In the 2021 Orange Bowl.
Now, for those who don't remember, this is Georgia's 34-11 throttling of Michigan, coming off of the 21 SEC championship loss. People were very down on Stetson Bennett. Georgia went out and kicked some ass, went on to win the national championship. Can you name the Georgia players that scored a touchdown in this game? And I'm not counting Stetson Bennett for passing touchdown.
Okay. Jermaine Burton.
Correct.
James Cook.
Correct.
Those are the two that I remember most. Give me there's got to be a Kendall Milton run or something, right? That it's sprinkled in.
You're forgetting a very big play. You're forgetting the first 2 touchdowns of the game.
Look, man, it's been a minute.
It's
I'm
been
old
a minute
now. Oh, it's the playoffs in 2021. So A.D. Mitchell had a touchdown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, A.D. Mitchell had a touchdown.
Do you remember the touchdown? Really?
Dude, it's hard to remember
this
one.
play is like burnt into my memory.
Not for
this
me.
game, the first half of this game, I'll tell
the
a story.
James Cook one and the Jermaine Burton one are the ones burned into my mind.
So the first drive, Georgia goes down, deep pass to Brock Bowers, drives again, out to Brock Bowers. Same way they score in the Natty, touchdown number 1.
Oh, this was the trick play, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
It was a trick
Kenny
play.
McIntosh throws a touchdown pass to A.D. Mitchell. So
Okay.
you got it right. Brock Bowers, A.D. Mitchell, Jermaine Burton, and James Cook all scored touchdowns in this game. Georgia had
Okay.
2 field goals. This was my first New Year's in Athens. I did not watch the second half of this game. I was in my bathroom.
Oh.
Fighting demons.
Have some bad food?
Yeah, dude. Had too much bad food.
Oh, way too much bad food.
But yeah, no, I remember thinking like, my God, Brock Bowers is so good. This was also, again, I didn't watch the second half of this game. I literally sat down on my couch, said,
So that's why the other two aren't burned into your mind.
But they're not burning my, but
I did not get food poisoning that night.
But boy,
maybe after, but during the game, I was fine.
I learned my lesson there. Hasn't happened since. But no, that Brock Bowers touchdown combined with immediately forcing a 3-and-out. Nakobe Dean in this game, I don't know if you remember that, was an absolute monster. Flying over the there was a play, Michigan runs an end around. I don't remember if it's an end around or an orbit motion pass. But Nakobe Dean calls it out, points at it, hawks him down. It's like a 3rd and 16 that he does. I don't remember what play specifically it was, but it's there. Like Nakobe Dean had an incredible game. Darian Kendrick had 2 interceptions in this game as well.
This was the Chaz Chambliss, I don't give an F.
This is Chaz Chambliss. I'm going to rupture your intestines, buddy.
And then Jamari Sawyer owning Aiden Hutchinson, and I believe it was Trayvon Walker absolutely obliterating one of their offensive linemen.
It was, yes, Trayvon Walker did that. Trayvon Walker also destroyed Cade McNamara, I believe.
Yeah.
Late in the game, he was doing a quarterback scramble and just got uplifted. A lot of fun moments in this game. It's fun to go back and watch those.
So what kind of food do you have to eat to be out and down for the count by halftime of a game?
Like,
we talking like just some little Cheetos? Or are we talking about just a lot of hamburgers?
half a fifth of Crown Apple.
Oh. That's not food.
It's got apple in it.
How do you get food poisoning from that?
Too much apples, man. I was trying to keep the doctor away and ended up needing them.
That crapple will make you feel crappy.
Yeah.
We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Don't know if Brooks is going to be in studio next week. I believe he will be, but I don't know if he will be for every day. But nonetheless, we're going to be here. There's going to be a live show happening next week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, 8 to 10 o'clock, regular programming. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for sticking with us up to this point in the show. And for this week, we'll catch you later.